Good evening. Planning Board is now in session. Hope everybody's doing well on this beautiful summer night. First item on the agenda is public hearing, Eversource Energy, 157 Corderville Road parking deck, major site plan review. This is continued from June 19th. And also the public hearing for Eversource Energy, 157 Corderville Road parking deck, special permit, lower impact development, also continued from June 19th. I'll ask the town planner to update us on what's happened up to this point. Karina.
Okay, on June 30th, Graves Engineering submitted a revised submission, we'll call it submission number 2, which was forwarded and simultaneously sent to Fuss and O'Neill. We received comments back from Fuss and O'Neill on July 13th, last week, several days in advance of this meeting, or with this one anyway, which brings us to this planning board hearing number 2 for the major site plan approval and lid. Just note that the applicant is scheduled for Conservation Commission hearing for a stormwater permit, continued to July 27th.
Yep.
And that's the update.
Very good. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. Again, my name is Mike Andrade with Graves Engineering. So as Karina mentioned, we did get a second letter back from Fuss and O'Neill, and I think with the exception of one minor item that we can talk about, all the outstanding comments were addressed. Really, all we did is provided some explanation, clarification on a few issues, some additional stormwater calcs, and a couple of site plan changes which I'd like to point out to the board. So as was mentioned at the last meeting here, myself and a couple members of Eversource walked the entire property looking for areas that we could convert from pavement to some other form, grass, whatever it may be. And believe it or not, we actually had a hard time doing this because they used just about every square inch of that site. But we did come up with an area right here that is currently pavement that we're proposing to convert to a crushed stone base, so they can still use that for laydown. They still do occasionally use that for laydown of some materials. So this is right adjacent to, there's a side or back entrance, if you will, for employees, where the gate is just outside this view on this sheet here. So right now this pavement is pretty wide. It's still wide enough that this conversion, removal of the pavement won't interfere with traffic entering or exiting the site. And again, that'll still be available from the laydown materials if it need be. So this area equals about 500 square feet. So as I mentioned at the first hearing, we were proposing a small increase of 1,320 square feet. So subtracting that, now we have an even lesser increase of 820 square feet on the site. And again, when looking at this in terms of stormwater for even the 100-year storm, that's about 2/10 of a CFS in the 100-year storm. So it's a drop in the bucket, if you will. And the 2-year storm is almost zero. So this increase is pretty negligible. I think Fuss and O'Neill agrees with that. Also, we looked at areas that we could add some landscaping to the site or habitat plantings, as it was mentioned. There aren't really any wetland systems around the site that we can enhance. I didn't notice any invasive species that we can clean up. And we did not have any landscaping adjacent to the garage here before because of its proximity to the structure itself. So we identified an area here, which is currently just lawn, between where the parking garage will be and an employee parking lot here, that we're going to plant some trees and shrubs. There's nothing there now really at all. So we'll be introducing some plantings there in that area. So those were the 2 plan changes. The final comment that Fuss and O'Neill had that was sort of outstanding, if you will, was with regard to some existing lights that should be added to the photometric plan. So these lights sit on this existing retaining wall on the top of the wall and face down towards a parking lot to illuminate the face of the wall, if you will, so trucks don't back into it. They're, I don't know how many watts they are. They're very small. They don't illuminate the sky at all. Frankly, I think they're going to be removed once this project starts anyway. It has no impact on the photometrics for the site or the project at all. So we don't feel that's really necessary to add that since they might be removed anyway. So that's all the comments. That's the plan changes. If anyone would like to me to go into any more detail about any of the changes or responses, I'd be happy to do so, or answer any more questions.
Great, thank you. I'll open it up to the board. Mr. Mills?
So I'm gonna go back to the lights, because I know it was a big discussion when we originally approved this new layout for the parking that's there. And I think it was my comment specifically, we didn't want it to light up and look like we didn't want it to light up and be very obvious from the road, and wanted it to remain discreet to where it is. So, I'm not saying we have to have a whole plan, but I would like at least something that says that the lighting plan will stay in effect to what it currently is. And if there's any change to that, then we'd have a say in the matter.
Right, so we did submit a photometric plan with the initial submittal, so that represents the lighting created from this project, in addition to what's already there. In the last revision, we submitted cut sheets of what those fixtures look like. They're all LED lights now, down facing. Both the lights for the poles on the upper deck and the lights under the roof on the lower deck. So we submitted all that information, and again, all that's reflected on the photometric plan. So there's no spillage, there's no real major increases in lighting. Again, the comment was that Fuss and O'Neill had was just to those small little, I know what you call them, landscape lighting almost, is what the equivalent to, that those should be added, and I don't feel that's really gonna be impactful whatsoever.
No further questions.
Mr. Jenks?
Good evening. On the lighting, the luminaire data that you did give us, to me seems to cover a whole bunch of different models. And where am I supposed to know which model the manufacturer's data refers to?
Good question. I could have been a little more helpful on that and highlighted the ones that were specified. They are specified on the lighting plan, the photometric plan, which model it is. I should have been a little more helpful for the board and highlighted which one in the height of the poles. But that information is all on the photometric plan that was submitted previously.
So the only way for us to know is go back to that plan and then get the numbers and then look it up on the manufacturer's data?
Correct. I don't have the lighting plan with
The
me
model
tonight.
number is on the plan,
It
though.
is, yes. But I don't have that sheet with me tonight, though.
Okay, let me go to a similar comment. What is the date of your reply to the Fuss and O'Neill? Is that the 30th?
I think that's correct, yes. Yes.
So in that, there are several places where you refer us to the Storm Scepter report. I'm looking at the answer number 3. You say, refer to the Storm Scepter report included with the revised, included within the revised stormwater report, which demonstrates 80% TSS removal rate is still achieved. It would be helpful if you could refer us to something specifically in that report that shows that the 80% TSS removal rate is still achieved.
Right. So,
It's the same type of question. It really says, go back and do some more research in that report.
Not exactly. So the stormwater report is the overall document. I'm sure Karina has a copy. I actually don't have a copy with me here tonight. Stormwater report is the overall stormwater calculations for the whole project. Within that is the storm scepter report, similar name but different. That storm scepter report is from the manufacturer of the unit. And on that sheet, I think it's maybe just one page, it shows the percent removal. So I'm referring to, I'm saying here, it achieves 80%. If you want to see the calculations, how that 80% is achieved, you open the stormwater report, you look to that one page. Yeah, I can show you. I'll show you what that report looks like.
You're just demonstrating now what I'm talking about,
Right, but
because you're asking us to dig through it as you just did.
well, I mean, it's
It would be helpful if you're gonna include that information, if you could put it in your report or say, see Plan 6, where it's noted.
okay. I get what you're saying, but we weren't asked to give 5 copies of the stormwater report, just 3. If you were interested in that kind of information, which frankly I didn't think you were, it's technical stuff, but that's fine if you are. Future reference, I guess, we'll include that in anything that's revised or submitted to the board.
You say in 4, the applicant has requested a waiver stating, I'm sorry, this is Fuss and O'Neill's comment. The applicant has requested a waiver stating that the parking structure is a redevelopment of an existing parking area, thus minimizing land disturbance and restricting the possibility of alternative stormwater management techniques. Do you agree with that?
Which comment are you looking at?
Number 4, right in the middle
Number
of their,
4.
I'm looking at your response to it.
Yep. Okay, I see it. Right, I think, the way this was designed is rather than have to clear land somewhere, blast ledge, which would be the case on this site, and construct a new structure somewhere, we utilize this existing impervious footprint, which already had a parking lot, and went up. So when you do something like that, yeah, you're a little limited in what you can do for stormwater treatment because you got to work with what's already there. So that statement's true, yeah, but that is the goal of the project was to minimize the land disturbance. That's why it's in that location.
So they're not, in your interpretation of their comments, they're not specifying specific things that restrict the possibility of alternative stormwater management techniques. It's just a general,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I think in the next sentence, they kind of acknowledge, yeah, okay, they believe the request is reasonable given that the structure is sufficient to meet the needs of the project. So they acknowledge that, yeah, this was our approach, this is how we designed it, and that it still complies with the requirements for the stormwater treatment.
Bill, could you just say what document you're looking at?
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm looking at
Our
the
response letter.
Graves response to Fuss and O'Neill
Yes.
dated June 30th.
Page 2.
Did you actually do any, I'm looking at that same document, number 11, which starts at the bottom of page 3. And they're talking about that 7-foot or so section of piping at, I think, 25% downfall.
Right.
And did you actually do any calculations to determine that that won't be a problem, or?
Yes, and it's not in the report because there is no really runoff. That when you do the, let me explain, let me back up a second. So the area we're talking about is this, above the wall, so this is higher than this lower level here now. There's a grade that comes down towards the top of the wall. So this all slopes away from the building towards this parking lot. So we don't want that runoff to go into the lower level of the garage. We're putting in some small little area drains here, 3 area drains, piping them together, coming down the slope on the corner of the wall and tying it into the drain system on the lower level. So a portion of this drain, in order to make that grade transition, is at that 25% slope. This whole area here is so small and it's grassed that the runoff is really immeasurable, if you will. So
Where does it go now?
this area just drains to the lower parking lot right now and gets collected by that catch basin system. It'll all still go the same place. We're just diverting it around. We don't want it running into that, which is now going to be an enclosed area on the lower level.
So the volume of water isn't gonna change.
That's coming off of this area?
Yeah.
No, there's no changes to that area.
But it's going, that drain is going to couple into a new drain that takes water off the top deck?
Nope, not the top deck, just this area that's above and adjacent to the structure. This little area right here.
So it doesn't tie into a new drain then?
It ties into the existing drain system.
Okay. Finding that extra 500 feet is a good thing. Small, but I understand the constraints of the site.
Yep, I'll just add to that too. I fought for more areas, to be honest with you. There were some areas I thought maybe they could lose, and some of the attendees said, no, we really need that. You know, there's nothing there now, but, you know, when we get deliveries and stuff, I said, okay. So I really think that's the best that we can do.
No more questions.
Thank you. Mr. Stein?
I was away on June 19th, but I did view the meeting, and filed the Mullins paperwork, so I'm eligible to participate in the public hearing. My feeling at this point is I would feel more comfortable voting after a more thorough review of the photometrics. So my recommendation would be at a subsequent meeting to bring the materials to go over the photometrics and
Thorough
More
review of what on the photometrics, because
the lights.
they've been reviewed by your consultant, and they had no comments. It was part of the submission package. Those lights that they're referring to, if those are the issue, we'll add it in that they'll be removed, because frankly, I think they're going to anyway. And I wish I brought a picture of it. I mean, it's literally no bigger than like an
So-
outdoor outlet fixture, if you've seen, with a tiny little light
Karina,
on it.
maybe I'm misunderstanding. Is it Fuss and O'Neill's contention that backing the lights that were proposed to remain, that weren't in the original photometric plan, that there's really no substantive change in the light impact of this project on the area?
According to Fuss and O'Neill's comment, it says, there appears to be existing overhead lights located along the existing retaining wall located along the east side of the existing parking area, which you pointed out, right?
Yep.
And the overhead lighting is not shown on the electrical plans, and it is unclear if they are to remain. The response was there are no light poles in those areas, but rather an outlet light combination attached to the top of the retaining wall. The site plans have been revised accordingly to correct the note which incorrectly labeled them as overhead lights. So I think it.
Yeah, I think maybe that's where the confusion's coming from. We had them mislabeled as overhead lights, which prompted Fuss and Neal's comment, a valid one, you know, you're showing lights here, are they gonna stay or what? And our response was, no, they're not overhead lights, they're, again, these tiny little outlet type of fixtures that are on the face of the wall. Again, those don't really throw any light, certainly not up, barely any down. We'll just remove those if that's gonna be a
So
point of
maybe I missed something. Are you adding more lights to that? I mean, does this come with a lighting component to it? Or
Yes,
you're
yep.
putting lights on?
The photometric plan was
Right.
submitted with the first submittal, which was reviewed by Fuss and O'Neill. They didn't have any comments on that. Their comment was on the mislabel that we had on the existing conditions.
Okay. I don't have any questions.
And
for now.
I just want to point out, you didn't provide a response to this last Fuss and O'Neill letter,
No.
correct?
No.
Okay.
Just that one comment I felt we could discuss amongst the board.
Okay, because that might have helped if you just had quickly done, and it would have clarified. Just saying.
We're doing the same thing now. I thought that was fine, but
Mrs. Luttrell?
Good evening. So the current stormwater infrastructure that you have in place is just going to continue to be utilized?
yes.
Okay. Thank you for the additional planting and the native trees. Are the shrubs going to be natives also?
Yep. Well, I don't know that I specified, or did I?
I don't think they're
I think
specified.
we're leaving it to the, I mean, it's gonna be difficult to water these, given their location, so we wanna price something that's hardy, but certainly, you know, something that's in keeping with the town and the site.
That's all, thank you.
I'll be right with you. Yeah, we'll see what the board wants to do. I think the question's very thorough tonight. It sounded to me like there's some revisions that need to be made to the plan to help with the issues that Mr. Jenks brought up. Not changing anything, but making it clearer to follow. Is that correct?
I didn't hear that, but.
Yeah, I might just add it, I think it's more of an issue of having it documented for the future. I mean, we can understand sitting here, you're sitting there talking to us.
Mhm.
But if there's an issue with, I'll go back to the storm scepter report. If there's an issue with something there, it would be nice if there was some resolution on the plan itself.
Sure.
Even just a footnote or,
Yeah, I understand, I acknowledge that, and, you know, and we're before a lot of boards, and every board's different. Some boards care to see that information, some don't, and some rely on just the peer review. So now that I know you guys are interested in that information, future reference, I'll include it in the documents that you all receive.
I went through the July 12th Fuss and O'Neill letter, which I think when you updated us, pretty much addressed each one of these items. I personally don't have a problem with granting the waivers that are outlined here. I'll open it up to the public. Any questions or comments? Yes, sir. You're going to need a mic, George. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, George Harris, 67 Mount Vickery Road. Sorry I couldn't make it last month, but I was away. I have two requests or questions to ask, and we are, myself and the Fosters are abutters to the southern parking lot, the back parking lot. And over the years, as the truck traffic has increased, the vegetation has decreased. So now we have a clear view of all the trucks, even some of the work crews walking around out back. So my request is, as part of this project, can you provide some type of barrier, whether it be more trees, or which are kind of hard to grow, or maybe a chain link fence with green slats to kind of like to block us from that back parking lot. And the second one is the existing back parking lot lighting. Over the years, I think that's high-pressure sodium. And once the fall comes and the leaves go away, it's pretty bright in our yards from the overflow of lights. So I know you're putting LED lights in. LED is being put in everywhere. Can they upgrade the lights to LED? You can then maybe shut half the lights off after 10 o'clock, put an override in so that if they do need lighting, they can dial up something and go to full brilliancy to get to their trucks or whatever. So those are my two requests as a neighbor. You know, I know you're spending a lot of money here, and we haven't done a lot of things over the years, and we've lived with the traffic, which is no big deal. It's part of living there. But the lighting is, and the view has changed definitely in the last 10 or 12 years. So that's my thing.
Could I get your name again? I'm sorry.
George Harris.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
George, go back. Can somebody point on the map that area where we want more screening?
It's not close to this parking garage. This might be the best view to get it here, so it's quarter of
Why don't you put it up so we all can see what we're talking about?
So this is, it's right in this pattern. So here's the building here, right? This is the big building is right under the arrow. Right under the arrow. So it's just along here. So
where's your house actually?
right there.
No, because they own all the property there.
Well, they own, it flares out, and then there's a 70-foot for Paul Foster, and then I start. So there's not a lot of wood.
You gotta grab a microphone, gentlemen.
I'm trying to see it. It's hard to see. This is 85, so it's here. This is 85, right?
Yes.
It's here. It's along this, there's your back parking lot where all the trucks and the vans and stuff park, and we're right here. We're like maybe 100 feet from the stone wall to the back, to my property.
Oh, okay, now I see Mount Vickery Road here.
Yeah.
Does it cross 85? So you're on this side of it?
Mount Vickery crosses 85, and then we have a driveway that goes right, we're right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that side of the site rises up, there's a bit of a knob there.
And then we're right
Yep.
in the valley, and then it starts going up again.
Okay, now they know where you are.
We're gonna try to get the GIS to zoom in on your lot, George. That way we can all see what we're talking about. This is exactly why we have public hearings, so that the neighbors can be aware of what's going on and provide their comments. And we know that the proponents want to be good neighbors. If there's an opportunity to take care of the neighbor, that's what we're going to do. Mike, do you have the authority to agree to these type of things
I
tonight?
certainly do not, no. To spend their money, no. Or any client's money, no. The contractor for the project is actually here, and he's interested in starting the work. Just whispered in my ear that there apparently is a long-term plan, I'm not sure of the timing of it, to replace all the existing, whatever they are, sodium lights with LEDs throughout the site, so it sounds like that would happen. I would think they'd want to do that anyway as part of their improvements program. But I can't comment on the timing of that. Okay, thank you.
George, grab a mic, and then, you gotta grab a microphone.
Just bring the button, the little button right there.
That doesn't show up on the TV, so if you wanna go up behind there, George.
It's right there. Okay, that's my house. That's Paul Foster's house. So he's got about 70 feet before we hit my property. And there's the parking lots that they'll drive around, they'll go through this way and they'll go around to wherever they go. So there's trucks and stuff all parked along here. And this vegetation from here all the way to my house now I can walk underneath it all. So it's 6, 8, 10 feet tall with just branches and a clear view of all those vans and even sometimes people, which is fine. I mean, that's no big deal. But I guess years ago they did have vegetation here, but it's all gone away because of the lack of sunlight or whatever. So that's what we're talking, right there. So that here it goes way up high. There's no issue there. It goes way up high. It's from that pretty much that whole parking lot. If you could line that parking lot, that would be awesome.
You can keep that in case. So, what I know about this part of the site here, this is a parking lot. This is a drive that connects to the lower parking lot. There is a bit of a grade change, a significant grade change going down in this direction. To my knowledge, that area hasn't been touched since it was constructed whenever, 20 years ago perhaps. And whatever vegetation is there, I think was just the tree line that was cleared. I don't think they even planted anything there that I ever noticed. So that vegetation, probably in my opinion, hasn't ever changed since this was built. So I hear his concern, I understand it. I can't, on behalf of my client, say, yeah, we'll put a fence in. Again, we want to be good neighbors. I can certainly put him in touch with the people that can make that decision. They can hash it out as a private matter. Really doesn't have any bearing on the structure project we're talking about, but of course, Eversource wants to be good neighbors, and we'll work with them directly on that. And we already talked about the LED lights. It sounds like that's going to happen throughout the site as well at some point.
Well, at the beginning of this project, we talked about waivers, and we talked about going throughout the site to identify areas for improvement. And here we have an area for improvement. So even though it's not the parking garage, it's still part of this process, in my opinion.
And I'm not trying to be harsh, but there isn't a bylaw that says you can't see. You have to screen everyone's view from everybody. You know what I mean? Because you can see an industrial site that's zoned industrial, whatever it may be, and probably has been that way for 20-something years. Now there's an opportunity for him. There's a hearing. Maybe I can get a fence put in. I understand all that. And again, I'm not saying the answer is no. I'm saying I can't make that decision, but I can put him in touch with the person that can.
Could you contact the person that can tonight? We could take a little recess.
Yeah, we can. We can try and get someone on the line. Again, I don't know how long this fence would be, how tall it would need to be, but those are details that could be hashed out, I suppose. But
How long you think, George?
I'm guessing 100 feet and maybe 8 or 10 feet tall, a chain link fence with the slats in them or something like that.
you're not going to get a chain link fence that tall.
No.
10 feet, no. I think probably the best you do is about a 6 or an 8 at the most.
Mr. Jenks?
I think we have a zoning issue with 10 feet.
6 feet's fine, George?
6, 8? I know they make them 8. They make them on tennis courts, so they're taller than that.
So
But I know you mean about the 10 feet, and then you got to,
if we could step out for a couple
Right.
minutes, try and
9
get
foot
someone on the
9.
line. Someone was supposed to be here tonight. I don't know why they're not, but we can try and get someone on the line.
All right, we'll take a couple of minute recess, and you can come back.
Thank you.
Maybe we can get it, keep things moving here tonight.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Mills?
Do we want to take a recess, or do we want to go to some of these discussion items?
We could go to a discussion item. Is that okay with the board?
Yeah, sure.
All right. The top one on page 2, discussion. Vote to appoint Department of Public Works Planning Board member. We have one candidate, is that correct? That's correct. All right, why don't we skip that one then? How about the next one? Vote to appoint Planning Board representative to Metro West Regional Collaborative. We have one candidate. Mr. Mills.
Make a motion, we appoint Mimi Latrell to be the planning board's representative for the Metro West Regional Collaborative.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Wouldn't help anyways. All in favor? 4-0. Thank you, Mimi. What about the Stonebrook? Is the proponent wasn't going to come in? It's very small money, right?
Mr. Chairman, I have to recuse myself. I'm a butter to this project.
Stonebrook?
Yep.
So in our packet, we have a single sheet, Stonebrook Village application fee reimbursements. So the proponent has submitted $1,170. Is that right?
Would you like me to explain it?
Yeah.
This discussion item has to do with Stonebrook Village having, back in May, submitted applications for modification to a definitive subdivision, in which they, give me 1 second, and a major site plan in which their intent was to ask the planning board if it was okay for them to change the name of the approved roadway from Stonebrook Court to Gaffney Way. The day prior to the planning board meeting when it was scheduled, they submitted a letter to us withdrawing their applications. So initially, they had submitted a check for $520 for modification of major site plan, and then also a check for $650 for modification to an approved definitive subdivision in accordance with the planning board's fee schedule, totaling $1,170, which is received by the planning department to compensate for time and effort spent in processing the applications. Following their withdrawal of their applications, we tallied up the time that we spent, Elizabeth, the business assistant for the planning department, and I, as town planner, how much effort and time we put into it. In this case, it wasn't a large amount because it was just a name change. We did go through the standard protocols of submitting the information to the various town departments as required for their feedback, following up with the applicant, posting agenda, getting everything in order. So we came up with a total of expended department costs of $237.75, which reflects 3 hours of Elizabeth's time and about 4.5 hours of my time, leaving a total of $932.25, which we thought would be available to be returned to the applicant, unless the board found another area where something we expended that we missed. The applicant did pay for their own advertising fees as well.
Mr. Mills.
No questions.
Mr. Jenks.
No questions?
Mr. Stein.
I'm willing to make a motion.
Um,
Or you prefer I just say no questions? No questions.
You said you sent this out to, this 2 hours here is of the other town departments?
That's just my time of coordinating things, going out, checking things. I didn't include any time of the other departments spent. That's correct, that's not included. So if DPW reviewed it or fire department reviewed it, that time is not accounted for here.
Well, on one hand, for you to go find out how much time they expended on this would mean that you'd be spending more time
Yes.
trying to find out how much time
Mhm.
the others spent on it. But they did spend some time on it. I would suggest how many departments did you send it to?
Give me 1 second. Board of Health. I think 6. Police Department, Fire Department, DPW, Board of Health. There's another one. I'm sorry, I have a standard list on my office.
So if they spent, if they
Which one?
spent,
Oh, the building department, right? Those are the 5 main where we usually get comments back of some sort. But again, it was just a name change,
right,
so there wasn't a lot to review.
if they spent 5 minutes on it, times 6 departments, you've got another half hour you have to add on here.
Half hour.
And
That
how
makes
about paper and toner?
They did submit copies that we distributed as required by the application. So I don't believe there was any excessive copying or printing. There was email correspondence back and forth with the applicant. Usually comments from the town's departments are received via email.
So I would recommend that you just add another half hour of some,
Say my rate at a half hour, because it's usually department heads that also review.
okay.
Okay, plus a half hour.
And then adjust the numbers accordingly.
Okay.
Mr. Stein?
Well, is that something that we can do right now, so that we can vote on this? Okay.
I think we just did it.
Sure.
Oh, you want
So
an
what's the-
actual number?
Yeah, so that we can vote on the number.
Yeah, I can tell you.
Okay, will you,
Mr. Mills?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the refunding of the Stony Brook Village application fees as adjusted by the town planner, per our discussion tonight.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 4-0. Thank you. Let the record show that Mrs. Luttrell is returning to the table.
That's all it is.
So that would be subtracted from that.
Yes.
Yep.
1870. Okay. Got it.
That doesn't seem right, if that's, hold on a second. That's an hour.
That's 3750 times 4.
Oh, okay, that's
Yeah,
the
that's
total.
not, I wish I was making that per hour.
Yeah. Gentlemen,
We're
we're
back.
back.
Thank you for allowing us to make that call. And again, so the gentleman that was supposed to be here, John Petrella, you probably remember from last meeting, he's actually on vacation. I did not know that, so. So we made a phone call to someone else, and they did agree to have the 8-foot chain link fence, 100-foot long, with the privacy slats installed along the common property line for Mr. Harris. And we confirmed that within the remainder of this year, I believe, that the existing lights throughout the site will be switched to LED.
Was that the plan already, or was that being sped up?
That was the plan already. The lights were anyway.
Okay. No, yeah, that's what I meant.
Yes.
Thank you.
So that'll be part of our minutes, that was, that the lights, you're confirming that there's a project to change out the lights. And then we'll, I would suggest that we would, in our record of decision for this project include a condition that, for the 100 feet of, did you say 8-foot fence with the slats?
That's what we discussed, 8-foot with privacy slots. Yep.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Is the board ready to vote tonight?
Just on the order of conditions, are the LED lights a condition as well?
That's up to the board. I mean, they're already committed to doing it, it sounds like, and that's going to happen some point in the remainder of this year.
I would be in favor of having it as the
Condition.
order of conditions on the plan.
Is the board ready to vote tonight?
Any other comments from the public?
Any other comments from the public? Is the board ready to vote tonight?
I am.
Very good. Mr. Mills?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the Eversource Energy Corderville Road parking deck for a major site plan review.
Second?
With conditions?
With conditions as discussed during the meetings.
So we have conditions and we have waivers. Mike, do you have a clear list of those waivers? I know that they're
Yes.
contained in Fuss and O'Neill's July letter.
It's in a letter dated May 22nd from me.
Graves' letter
Yes,
of May.
That was in the original submission.
yes, it was. Yep.
Well, I think those are the ones that are resolved until tonight, so there's more.
Karina, it should be in this bound document right here. Yep, that one right there.
Take us to them.
Second page in, May 22nd letter. Summary and waiver requests.
May 22nd, project summary. Oh, into the,
Mine's double-sided, I'm sorry.
okay. Following waivers.
Due to the nature of the project and the previously mentioned reasons, we respectfully request the following LID waivers. Clustering of buildings. Use of stormwater management components that provide filtration, treatment, and infiltration, such as vegetated areas that slow down runoff, maximizing infiltration and reducing contact with paved surfaces. Creation of sub-watersheds to treat and manage runoff in smaller, decentralized, low-tech stormwater management techniques to treat and recharge groundwater close to the source. Emphasis of simple, non-structural, low-tech, low-cost methods including open drainage systems, disconnection of roof runoff, and street sweeping. Use of native plant vegetation. Techniques integrated into every aspect of site design to create hydrologically functional lot or site. And it talks about open channel along roads, rain gardens, buffer strips, use of roof gardens, on and on, use of permeable pavement. That was in, that's section 174-13.3 E2, which is the LID, and it's referring to paragraphs C, D, E, F, I, J, and J. And then Section 3 of the Rules and Regulations for Lower Impact Development Special Permits. You're asking for a waiver, the board to waive a wastewater disposal plan, drainage calculations, renovation, and treatment of runoff, earth removal / fill calculations, water balance calculation, and hydrogeologic assessment. That's your May 22nd letter. And then Fuss and O'Neill's letter dated July 12th. Doesn't have a problem with any of those waivers. So that would be the list of waivers. And then the conditions of approval.
Chain link fence, the lights being switched to LED, and
So the chain link fence, 100 feet, 8 feet high, with the slats, privacy slats. And then replacing the old lights with new LED lights within a 1-year period. As you know, we have a standard condition that the board and you have a right to revisit the lighting for over the next, for 1 year after the project is constructed, to see if you have a problem with insufficient light and you want to add something or modify. And then if the neighbors or the town has a problem, we have the right to go back and ask you to make changes too.
Okay,
And we do that over the course of the 4 seasons, so that we can see how it impacts, you know, during those 4 seasons. So we have just the 3 conditions. 2 relating to the lights and 1 for the fence, and the list of waivers that I read. Mr. Mills?
Want to read make another motion on top of that, or that was?
I think you got to modify the motion to include what I just said, basically, as
Okay.
far as waivers
So, Mr.
and...
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the Eversource Energy major site plan review with the list of conditions and waivers that were just recited by the chairman. Specific,
feet of 8-foot-high chain link fence.
Gonna have 100 feet of chain link, 8-foot high chain link fence with privacy slats on the southern end of the property, along George Harrison's property. That the lighting will be changed to LED lights within 1 year on the exterior of the property. And then we may revisit the lighting within a 1-year period, if there isn't, to reevaluate if there's insufficient or excess over spread.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
Just
Mr.
one
Stein?
discussion point, wouldn't it be along the entire southern boundary of the property and not just confined to Mr. Harris's?
No, because it was remember when we walked it, there's that further section further up, there's just that one piece that comes down.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification, the actual abutting property isn't Harris, it's Foster, right? Isn't there that 70-foot strip?
Correct.
Correct. So Harris.
But the fence will go up on Eversource property.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor? 5-0. Very good. The town planner will,
You need a special permit too.
right, we have to do the motion for LID. Mr. Mills?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the request for a special permit for lower impact development for Eversource 157 Corderville Road.
Second?
And that would incorporate the waivers that we read
And
Uh,
conditions.
that pertain to the LID sections of the code, correct?
Correct.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor? 5-0. So what happens is the town planner drafts a decision, notice of decision, that she'll share with you,
It's a good place to start, yep.
and gives both sides an opportunity to, if you want to change some words, or if we miss something. And then when both sides feel comfortable with it, we have it reviewed by the town council, and then it's signed by the chairman, and then submitted to the town clerk, and then that begins the 20-day appeal period.
Does the chairman signing happen in a meeting or somewhere in between?
No, as soon as town council, as soon as
Okay.
the two parties are good with it, then it goes to town council looks at it, if it says it's good to go, then town planner calls me in and I sign it.
Fair enough.
When we need an extension, oh no, we voted, that's when this is for when we vote on, when the planning board votes, not when the decision is signed.
Yeah, we don't, we,
We satisfy this.
yes. The question was, the approval period ends on July 22nd. However, we just finalized the action tonight,
Mhm.
so we're all set. Very good. Glad we were able to take care of the neighbor.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I keep looking.
This is yours.
Yes.
That's done. Is Mr. Helen here? Mr. Helen, come forward, if you would. We have an 8 o'clock public hearing, but I see it's a few seconds before 8, so we can
Excellent.
take care of this item.
Great,
like.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're the only candidate that we have. You're an incumbent.
Mhm.
You've been on the Public Works Planning Board for how long?
3 years. Yep, one term.
Was it fun?
It was a blast. No, it was good. We've got a good group of people on the committee, working well with the DPW superintendent, and just looking for one more term, I think.
Open it up to the board. Mr. Mills?
No questions.
Mr. Jenks?
I think, based on his comment that it was fun, we ought to discount him.
Minus 1 point.
Mr. Stein?
Thanks very much for your service. Glad you're
Very much.
reapplying. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Jesse. Yeah,
Mrs. Latrell?
Yes, thank you.
absolutely.
Very good. Mr. Mills?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve James Helen to the Department of Public Works Planning Board position for another term.
Second?
I think the verb would be appoint, not approve.
Okay, appoint.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? 5-0. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks for your support.
Nice night.
Next item on the agenda is an 8 o'clock public hearing, continued public hearing, 0 Chestnut Hill Road, definitive subdivision. And 8:05, public hearing, Chestnut Meadow, 0 Chestnut Hill Road, special permit, lower impact development. This Public hearing is continued from May 1st, May 15th, June 5th, and June 26th.
For the record, my name is George Connors. I'm an attorney
Yeah,
representing...
hold on one second, George. Do we need...
So, Mr. Chairman, just as a point of clarity, because of the Mullins rule, and I missed a couple of meetings on this, I am unable to vote on this matter, so I am going to step away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. I'll ask the town planner to update us on the progress with this proposal. Karina?
Is he technically recused, or just, is Andy recused, or just not part of it? Not present.
No, yeah.
Did you already say when they continued?
Yep.
Okay.
Just the progress.
All right. Progress for Chestnut Meadows subdivision for definitive subdivision, approval and special permit for lower impact design. I'm just gonna update us
Okay.
on where we were from last time. The last planning board meeting was on June 26th
Mhm.
and continued to this evening. On June 11th, Cornerstone Engineering submitted a new plan set, a new submission, I'll call it number 5, with plans dated July 6th,
Mhm.
2017, which with some other documents, which was also submitted to Fuss and O'Neill for review. At this time, we do not have Fuss and O'Neill review comments, because even though they were on the 11th, Fuss and O'Neill didn't get them till Thursday morning, I believe,
Mhm.
which didn't give them enough time fairly
Right.
in this instance. Which brings us to this planning board meeting here. In addition, at the last planning board meeting, I was asked to follow up with the fire department and the police department regarding the roadway name that was
Yes.
proposed.
Yes.
And we kind of went through emails, and you can update us on that once you go.
Mhm.
Let's see, we also received a letter from Freddie Gillespie as chairman of the Open Space Preservation Commission. I'd like to call it an informal letter because she hadn't vetted it through the commission yet with a formal vote. She has an upcoming meeting, but she did supply us with some comments on the open space. We also received comments from the DPW regarding proposed or potential homeowners association language
Yes.
for the subdivision, specifically related to the operation and maintenance of the stormwater system in the future, who would
Mhm.
maintain that, the landscaped islands that were proposed, and the trees that are located on private property, the street trees.
Correct.
And you can take it from here.
Okay. After we had our last meeting, I met with the
George,
Fire
tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm George Connors. I'm an attorney representing Habitat. I'm also an engineer with Cornerstone. And at the last planning board hearing, we had discussed the layout of the road and islands and things of that nature as the probably the most predominant aspect of the plan. We had submitted a concept for the islands, and we discussed that with the fire chief and the DPW director a couple days after that. I think you've seen some emails back and forth on that. They have agreed that this island in the front, which is about 100 feet long, about 10 or 12 feet in width, and this island at the end of the circle are acceptable to them. So then we went ahead and redesigned the site. The center here is a elevated island, and the drainage is the same as it was before, insofar as the sideline of the island is going to be at the pavement, the highest point, and it's going to slope down almost like a typical cross-section with the 3-inch slope to the edge of the curb. So each one of these over the 100 feet, each one of these islands, each one of these roadway aspects are going to have a slope just as if it were a crowned center line. There's no change in drainage in this area. There's actually a reduction of about 1,800 square feet of impervious area because we went to 20 feet under the suggestion that this board had, also vetted with the fire, police, fire and the DPW. So that 950 feet, less times 4 feet removal, and then add in this island and the little triangular area where we transition from the 2 roads to 1, actually have a little bit less impervious area. So the drainage doesn't change whatsoever, at least not calculable. The other aspect of that change is that the Lot 12 now has a reconfigured property line along the street. You'll see that it's 70 feet at the width at this location, and then it's back to 50 at this particular location, and that's your typical roadway cross-section from that point up to the end. We also enhanced the planting. This is a color diagram. There was a suggestion that perhaps cars coming north on Chestnut Hill Road approaching the intersection might have some view into the site and see houses. We evaluated that. The existing tree line is really on the MWRA property. So along about 50 feet of our property line from our property line at Chestnut Hill Road in, we're going to put in some rhododendron maximus. They'll grow up and cover that understory where the pines don't have the vegetation in the lower edges. In the existing condition, there's a lot of scrub at that particular location under the trees, but in the fall, the vegetation will lose the leaves and you'll be able to see in there. So we added that in. And then the landscaping is basically as we discussed the last time, the types of trees and things of that nature. Did talk about that a little bit with Ms. Galligan relative to trees in the island and the type we've chosen. We have also changed the open space a little bit. Now there's 19%. It's changed a bit. So there's well in excess of the 10%. We had indicated in a letter some of the lid components, highlighting those particular aspects. As I said at the last meeting, our drainage system was acting as a lid in terms of infiltration. This is a large basin here, and then we had a infiltration trench in this location here, and then water ends up going off in that direction. But all of our stormwater is generally managed in this direction. It ultimately flows down along to this location and into this location. There was never any discharge onto a budding property here. It infiltrated into the ground. There was an area in that particular location that had been mined out and filled with a odd material that was impervious. That's why there was some ponding at that location over several of the years in the past. That material will be removed. Underlying the site is sand and gravel, very, very deep, and perks very well. So this particular basin here and these infiltration trenches and stormwater conveyances will infiltrate the entirety of the 100-year storm. All storms up to and including the 100-year storm. The only thing that we're still out of sync on is a road name. There were several road names that we proposed to the developer. He has not yet chosen one. That, I don't think, is a big issue. We'll just come up with one that's acceptable. So I can respond to questions and comments and suggestions at this particular point.
Open it up to the board. Mr. Jenks? Yes.
Good evening, George. Who is, I haven't seen the actual application, but who is the owner of the property?
The owner is the Johnson Campbell Realty Trust. They live in town, one of them lives in town.
And you are representing them, is that?
I'm representing Habitat, the builder, the developer.
And they're not represented in this at all?
Habitat?
No, the Johnson Trust.
Grab a microphone, go up to the...
My name is Marshall Gould. I'm an attorney in Worcester, and I represent Johnson Campbell Realty Trust. We've been very aware of what they've been doing from the time of the purchase and sale agreement all the way through this time.
Thank you. The modern wonders of technology, I've lost my notes. Can you bounce ahead?
Sure,
to,
Mr. Stein.
Mr. Connors, have you read the July 11th letter from the Open Space Commission?
I have, yes, I have.
Okay. Can you just take me through the difference between what the Open Space Commission is recommending and your current plan?
The open space is talking about, in not any particular order, the 81U, a lot would be set aside under one of the provisions of your subdivision code for a period of 3 years. That would be one of the larger lots in the site as a open space area. In addition, they talk about the plan meeting the 10%, but in some areas, predominantly, let me get it. Along that line there, it's 10 feet wide, and along this line, along here, it's 10 feet wide, and their recommendation is, or they don't seem to think that has very much value, but I would point out that the entire subdivision, other than the north side where the road is, which is right there, Fisher Street, there's a railroad that runs along there, but all of that land surrounding it is open space, either by a trust, open space trust, or the MWRA. In terms of the open space, it's been reconfigured, and it follows a line. I'll have to go up there. It's that yellow line that runs around the property. You can see it going along there. And everything on the outside of that is dedicated as open space in perpetuity.
So your plan is essentially that the 19%
Yes,
is within a ring around the parcel.
yes.
Okay. Freddie, can you speak to the difference from your perspective, please? And it would help, Freddie, if you could actually, grab the mic and go show us on the plan.
Hi, I'm Freddie Gillespie, the chair of the Open Space Preservation Commission. First, I have to say, The letter you have from July 11th was from the Open Space Preservation Commission after our meeting, not from me as an individual. That was a prior letter when we couldn't meet for the last meeting. So the letter for July 11th is an official, unanimously voted upon by the commission recommendation. This plan here came to us after our meeting, so we haven't seen it. So I really can't, as a representative of the commission, speak to it. I will say it still has the objectionable 10-foot wide strips. I did have a look at it myself, speaking as an individual, that I'll bring back to my commission, and it appears the increase of 19% open space isn't exactly all what we would count towards the 10%. So yes, there's more land dedicated to it, but it's not necessarily land that meets the 10% requirement addition. And without thoroughly reviewing it, I would question some of the value of it. And it appears it was in response to Conservation Commission requirements. We never, if it meets the requirements, we don't demerit or, you know, look badly on something that's double dipping, you know, that's meeting the Conservation Commission's requirements for a 20-foot setback and meeting the open space requirements. However, it still has to have the benefit of open space. And as we know, we've just embarked on a several years of deed research project from Mass Audubon. We've seen the results. These 10-foot strips offer no value. They're impossible to monitor, enforce, and they're hardship to the property owners. They're on their deeds, they may show up sometime. I mean, they just are not worth, as Mass Audubon said at their presentation, why bother? I think that's a pretty strong comment. So looking at that, what we've been asking for, and we'd be happy to meet with a project proponent to come up with some layout that's better. When you look at all this, the deep open space, that's all wetlands. And yes, a lot of it is, they did come up, when we appreciate, they did come up to the 10% upland requirement. They originally hadn't had it as all upland. But these narrow 10-foot strips, it's just like, you know, just toss them out. It's not worth our time and, you know, going through the deeds and, you know, putting it on some spreadsheet that we have to keep track of, and the property owners in the future. So that was the main.
So, but having said that, if I'm interpreting the plan correctly, the 10-foot strips are aligned or bordering other protected open space.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So here, I don't know how deep the upland is to the wetlands, but it's deep, so we didn't bother measuring it, right? If there's a 25-foot no touch to the wetlands, but along here. And additionally, there's...
So, Mr. Connors, where Freddie's indicating, what is that? What is that open space bordering?
That open space along the bottom of that plan on the south side borders the MWRA. I'll tell you exactly.
Is that not inherently protected?
It is actually owned by the entity, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, Division of Water Supply Protection. We did talk with them on several occasions as an aside, because when we were mapping the wetlands in that area, we had to get permission to go on their land to satisfy a conservation restriction. So I did talk with MWRA relative to this, and they understood that this project is coming in. But all the land to the south of that is what I just said, and the land to the upper right-hand corner, all that, other than where the railroad is, which is right there, all that land in there is an open space trust, and that is the trustees of the reservation. So essentially, other than the railroad and an abutter to the west, which is right there, the entire site is surrounded by open space.
So, Mr. Connors, my one recommendation, if this gets continued further,
Yeah.
would just please try to collaborate with the Open Space Commission so that we can have this hashed out before a planning board meeting. I don't think that it's
No, I
necessary to go through
understand.
this stuff.
I understand this has gone on for a long time. It actually started in the very beginning when we started talking about a cluster subdivision there, and we met with the open space in about a 1.5-hour meeting with the client. And the client could not seem to understand any of this, so we went to the as of right, which under 214-14 has open space either as the 3-year parcel, A, or B, certain portions of each lot collectively equal to 10% of the gross open space. So we do meet that. We've added it in. There is no definition in here that says it can't be wetlands. We've changed it to come to open space that is 10% uplands. It's,
But this is a really high priority area.
I understand that, and it's
Conserva-
a
and-
high
and-
priority
and open,
area.
Mr. Connors, you
completely.
know open space and land conservation is extremely important to the residents of Southborough.
We
So
understand that.
as a planning board member, I'm asking you to please collaborate with the Open Space Commission so that we don't have unnecessary differences that have to get aired out during these hearings, please.
I would love to do that.
All
We
set.
tried that. I
Thanks.
just don't think it's gonna happen.
Thanks, Don.
Mrs. Luttrell.
Thank you. You said that the open space is the yellow line,
Yes.
but on my plans, there's an arrow that goes beyond that, and it shows the Conservation Commission monumentation through the open space.
That yellow line is the same line that's on this particular land use plan that will deed out those parcels to individual owners.
Where does this, what is this arrow pointing to? It says open space easement, and the arrow is going beyond? That's the new,
Goes to this line here. See, this line is a monumented line.
so this is the 7/6/2017 plan, and it's incorrect?
That particular location is just an arrow, that arrow going over that line. It should have ended right on that line. And that was discussed several times. It's just a Scrivener's error. We can correct that. I'm very sorry about that. But if you look at the land conveyance plan that shows the mathematics of the easement, that is the parcel that has the jurisdictional and legal aspects of the open space.
So the mathematics is to the yellow line and not to the line that is pointed out on the plans?
Say that once more time.
So, it's the same arrow on the,
Oh,
on
that-
page 4 that has all the, lot area tabulation. So is the open space amount, is it figured to where it shows with this arrow, or is it figured to that yellow line?
It's to this particular line, which mimics that yellow line in this drawing here. This is the conveyance drawing. As you require that the plans and the deeds would have the open space easements in the deed, it would be from this plan here that we would draw those legal descriptions. There's a slight error with that arrow. I'm sorry about that.
So the open space follows the 25-foot no-touch? It's the same?
It varies. It varies a fair amount in in different areas.
Okay, I'll move on. So my concerns pretty much remain the same from the first hearing. although with the exception of there is 10% upland. I agree with the Open Space Preservation Commission that those narrow 10-foot strips are of no open space value. They're impossible to monitor, and they're encroached on about 100% of the time. So they offer no open space value. I was disappointed that the reduction in the street width didn't result in an improved open space configuration. And I would have to agree with the Open Space Preservation Commission that having a single lot, although temporarily as a park, is of more open space value than those narrow 10-foot strips. Will there be a light installed for emergency vehicles so they can access the road going the wrong way?
No, no. The discussion with the fire chief at the first meeting we had with him was that if we brought water down to the site, then we would not need to have that particular aspect of the subdivision. He's happy with the water being there for fire protection.
Okay, and he's okay with the landscaped island?
Yes.
Because we received some communication from the police and fire, but it's only in regards to the street name. I didn't see anything saying that they're okay with the...
That's correct. He has not sent anything. I don't know why. He's had the plans, and we met both, myself, both Karen and the chief met probably 2 weeks ago on a Thursday. And he was happy with everything as long as Karen was. I don't know why he hasn't responded, but he hasn't.
Okay. DPW did. I did get a letter from Karen Galligan, DPW. Right. Could we try and reach out to police and fire and see if they're okay with the subdivision plans? So we have their okay before we move forward?
Yes, just to note, we received an email from George on July 6th, from George Connors on July 6th, explaining to us that he had met with the fire chief and the DPW director the prior week and had agreed upon the islands, the 20-foot pavement, and discussed the water line, which is referencing the public water line, which, by the way, Fuss and O'Neill had reviewed that in that set of plans, but they failed to remove that sentence from the letter. In previous meeting, Don had also requested that the fire chief supplies with like an official memo saying he's on board with those changes.
I know that hasn't come, and I don't know why.
But just to confirm, that's still on the checklist to be received. We still have to get that.
Okay. Are you going to be asking for a waiver for 174.13.3E2J, which is the lid techniques integrated into every aspect of the site design? Because those
met all the lids and had indicated in a letter summary of lower impact development techniques for Chestnut Meadow. On July 6th, there were 1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, the specific techniques that are called out in our bylaw aren't being utilized.
If you need that, we will be happy to do it, but as I said, the lids are low impact development. The impact is so that there is less pervious surface and there is infiltration of water into the ground, so receiving waters and rivers don't go dry. This entire site infiltrates every ounce of water in the existing and in the proposed condition into the various stormwater managements, which are infiltration basins and dry wells, and the filter and treatment in the forebays, and preserving 90% of the river. But if you want us to ask for a waiver for other things that are itemized and we don't use, I'm happy to do that, if that's required. I don't think it is, but
On your development impact statement, it lists that 2.5 acres of impervious surface, roads, buildings, and other, but the plans show 5% with only the road and the walkway.
I'm sorry.
So on the development impact statement that
Yeah.
came with your application,
Yeah,
it asks to list before and after development, the acreage, roads and buildings and other impervious surface.
okay.
That says 2.5 acres,
That'd be about right. I don't have it in front of me.
but the plans say 5% and it's only the road and walkway. It doesn't count the buildings.
Oh, the 2.5 includes the buildings.
Right. So it's
But
less.
the roadway and the sidewalk is probably only a 0.5 acres. 1,000 times 2,400. I'm sorry, 24,000. Yeah, the road and the sidewalk would be about 0.5 acres, just those. The reason that you tabulate that out differently than the houses is that roads collect urban runoff from street maintenance and cars driving down it, dogs and things like that, but roofs don't. So the roofs make up the difference, another 2 acres of roofs, and that's why you have those two different numbers.
Will a homeowners association be operating and maintaining the stormwater?
Is that per Ms. Galligan's letter?
Yeah.
And for the landscape, we envisioned that because she didn't want to have any part of the landscape maintenance.
That's all I have, thank you.
Mr. Jenks?
Thank you. George, I think you've done a lot here to comply with LID requirements, even if they weren't the specific items in the LID regs. The intent is, I think, met with other things that you're doing. I had a, come on, computer. I had a question on one thing. I didn't understand what you were talking about. Just 1 minute, I'm sorry. Okay, you talked about the minimization of grading and/or clearing of existing woodlands. The limit of work has been designed to remain entirely within the pre-existing active agricultural field. What is the pre-existing active agricultural field?
It is virtually the entire site other than the wetlands. If you look at the plan, along the edge here is a little bumpy line, a curvilinear bumpy line that goes along. That is the property line where the canopy is on the MWRA, I call it, it's DCR land. Along the top of the site, there is a little bit of tree intrusion along here, but this is field from roughly the property line here to just a few feet off the property line. The field goes up to this location here where it's down to the bottom of a slope and into the wetlands. It follows along at this location here and near the top of the slope as it falls down into the wetlands. So from there all the way over again to the property line at the DCR, it is open. And then it's open up onto the end here at the property. That's about 70 feet or so. So the entirety of the development footprint is in that agricultural field. That entire, all the houses, all the yards, all, everything.
And that field all around the subdivision will remain as classified as agricultural?
No. No, there'll be houses on all of those lots. If you look at the setback line, I'm sorry, on that plan there, there's a setback line from the road right there. So from that point down to that point there will be house and yard and driveway. It's a little bit bigger on that lot. It won't take it all up, but the actual building footprints are fairly constrained with the setbacks and side yards on all of these.
Now, I understood that. I thought the area you were describing was the area outside the subdivision, when you
No.
were talking about the agricultural land area.
Oh, no, this is agricultural land. It's in agricultural use now. They hay it a couple times a year, I guess. So it's technically an agricultural field that we're converting to a residential subdivision. That's the point. But we're not cutting down trees to do that, because there aren't any.
Okay. You talk about the calculations of impervious materials, and is that in the, are the calculations in the report that was done for conservation?
Yes.
Is that where they are?
Yes, and Fuss and O'Neill's seen those as well. Each lot has a particular amount that is dedicated in the model, a standard model, as to what the impervious surfaces would be.
Okay, and you talked, I've been looking for, and I can't find it right here now, but you talked about, I think, the use of some troughs.
Troughs, swales.
Yeah.
Okay, what happens in the lower area, that area there is a trough. Basically, it's a channel. It is lower in the middle. It's just a wide channel that will convey water along it and infiltrate it into the ground. Again, because it's sand and gravel there, very deep, well-drained sand and gravel. Our theory is that area there was mined out for brick mortar when they built the MWRA tunnel. There is also a swale there, and there is a swale there that I think you could call troughs. Perhaps Vito named them troughs.
In the northwest section where you've got that strange fill, have you done testing for septic systems there?
We did, and if you look at the test there, those are the locations we found with the decent sand and gravel. That area in there that was lower, as we said, probably mined out, had been refilled with all sorts of material from construction. It's very hard, it's very impervious, it's a loam-type material, it's got railroad ties, it's got concrete ties and bottles and lunch and stuff like that, all sorts of debris in an area about, I think it was about 3,000 or 4,000 square feet. And then it was mowed in that area as grass, and it just became a highly productive loam-type material. We couldn't even dig into it with our hand augers. We had to get a backhoe out there and dig it out. But that material will be removed from the site and refilled with decent sand and gravel to approximate the entire site, which is a sand and gravel deposit.
Do you know at this point where that fill is going to go?
It may be screened and used as loam around the houses.
But there is a possibility it will leave the site?
I don't imagine much of it will, just the debris and things. It's loam. It's a clay material, and they'll bring in, I would, if I were building this, bring in some sand and loam and mix all three together and come up with a product to landscape all those houses. I would guess that because of the depth of loam on some of the site, there'll be ample material and they'll simply sell that at some point in time.
You talked specifically about street sweeping. Is that something that is going to be part of the plan, and will the homeowners association be responsible for that?
Under the stormwater requirements by DEP, you have to identify the mechanisms that you will take out the total suspended solids from the stream and the storm flow in the stream. Not stream on site, but the stream of techniques to take it out. So there's street sweepings and other things, and street sweepings have to be done on an annual basis, whether it's the town, and I don't know that they will, because I don't know that they'll take care of all the other stormwater basins. It seems to me that they wrote their letter that the stormwater basins are going to be our responsibility, but I don't think that the street sweepings are.
Is it your intent that this will be a public road?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask Freddie a question, or? Freddie, do you, is the Open Space Commission taking the position that the band of open space here does not meet our regulations?
We're taking the position that it has no value and is more headache, and it just, because you can choose A or B, because this has no open space value additional that we could come up with to what will be there without this band, given that all of this is going to be open space, not touched because of the riverfront area and Concom. And this all here is, most of it is the 25 no touch to the wetlands. These additional 10-foot strips with stormwater coming down to them, swales or these right to the open space. The fact that you're not going to be able to monitor them, it's a difficult site, challenging, because it's agricultural land and hay. If you make it open space, it's going to look, there's nothing there to say, oh, this is shrubs or trees. It's going to be grass, and it's going to be lawn with fertilizer and chemicals. So we're not saying it couldn't meet the regulations. We're just saying you have the other option, and if it's not going to have meaningful open space, go with the other option. 1.574 acres of upland as a park for 3 years. We have never made that recommendation before. However, we spent $60,000, $70,000 on this deed research project, and when you know better, you do better. And we decided that 3 years of open space value, which is allowable for, under your choice, has more value than no value in perpetuity that you can't manage, monitor, or enforce.
Thank you. No more questions?
George, I guess hypothetically, assuming that if this project gets approved in August or September of this year, when would the construction begin?
I do not know. I do not know. I do know that we discussed with the fire chief that building permits would not be an issue with him, but certificate of occupancy would until the water line is run in its entirety through the site and to the site.
And who's going to pay for that water line?
The developer,
The developer.
yes.
And that'll start up at, by the railroad bridge
Yes,
and come right down the road straight into the site.
yes,
The developer will pay for that.
yes.
And would that
That
be
was discussed with DPW and the fire chief.
including the repairs to the road? Imagine there won't be much left of the road if you
No,
put a
there'll be
water
nothing, nothing left of the road. We've discussed that. We're gonna put a tight binder of a certain dimension, a little bit more than the regulation requires, because that's what Karen wants. And that will sit for a year, and then we'll put the top on after that.
Sequence of the house, of the street construction, the new road construction, would that coincide with the water line installation?
Yes, except that the discussions we've had with DPW and fire are that they would allow us to close the road during daytime working hours for 5 days while we run the water line down Chestnut Hill, and then a year later for a day to pave it. So that would certainly be at a time when school's out.
And all of the concrete trucks, lumber trucks, tradesmen would access the site from which direction?
Well, it would have to be the conventional direction off of Route 30 to the north, from Route 30 north to the site.
From Route 30 north to the site.
Mm-hmm.
You might remember, and Mr. Pizzoni might remember, going back to the 1980s, when I was on the planning board at the time, the town was being discovered, and I remember Pine Hill Road was a very primitive road, and when those A&R lots were installed, the road was destroyed. Wasn't much of the road anyways, but the road was basically destroyed, and the town had to pay to repave that Pine Hill Road. And those were A&R lots.
Hmm.
So we know that Chestnut Hill Road is pretty primitive right now,
Mm-hmm.
and you're gonna build 12 houses. The number of construction, heavy equipment, heavy trucks rolling down that road is gonna destroy all, if not all of it, some of it. Has that been discussed with DPW?
No, it has not.
I know when we put the water line on Sears Road was a primitive road back in the 80s. And the developer ran the water line down Sears Road and repaved the road. I'm not sure if they paid the whole thing or if they shared it with the town. But this sounds so similar to the situation on Pine Hill Road, where the road was destroyed, and that was just A&R lots, frontage lots. I think that discussion needs to happen so that there's no surprises when the road gets destroyed.
I'll be happy to talk with the DPW about that.
Also, turning back the clock, the regulations for open space in the 80s, I could have this wrong, but I don't think I do, called for 10% open space and allowed for that to be a single lot for 3 years, and if the town didn't purchase it or make other arrangements, then it would revert back to the developer and be available to build a house.
Correct.
And if I remember correctly, 100% of those lots were not picked up by the town, and have a house on them today, leaving the subdivision with 0 open space. Is that your memory also? Do you remember
I
that?
can't, it's not my memory, but I can't imagine the town buying a lot in a subdivision for open space. I can't imagine it happening. Originally, in the 50s, when the subdivision control law was created, it was for a area where kids could play while the bulldozers ran up and down in subdivisions that had 100 and 200 and 300 lots, Campanelli and Sorrell and all those people. And they took a long time to build, and at the end of 3 years, they're in another phase, or maybe the whole project was built. But that was the idea.
Well, I know that when the planning board would approve these subdivisions and ask the developer to leave a lot comprising 10% available, the planning board would go to the selectmen and ask them to buy the lot. And if you listen closely, you can still hear the laughter in this room when the planning board proposed that.
I have no doubt.
And that's why it's, again, my memory that 100% of those those lots that were created for that purpose now have a house on them. So, and the reason I asked you about the construction, when it would begin, and would it be phased over time, or would all these 12 houses go up in 1 year or 6 months, or?
I can't answer that. I can only tell you that any of the projects we've done for Habitat before were generally built out fairly quickly. They may sit for a year before they start, but then once they get going, they seem to move right along. If the economy changes that, I don't know. So I really can't answer that, other than historically their work has progressed after they began. And imagine finishing a project someplace else and dedicating the manpower to that is one of those constraints. But in terms of open space, I'd like to go back to that. You know that when we came in here a year and a half or 2 years ago to talk about open space and a different type of plan, we have worked very hard on this. We have given you the 10%. I don't believe it's ever going to be acceptable unless we start to encroach upon lot areas that are usable or beneficial to the development of the site. We've prepared 10% or 18%, or now it's 19. We're able to put the 244-14A and B in play on this. So I don't see any common ground on this open space other than what we've done. We've constantly added more in as this project has gone forward. But this is a site that is completely, if not it's almost completely surrounded by open space, albeit wetlands and things of that nature. But I don't envision people walking along the perimeter of this site and doing things in that open space. I just don't see that.
Well, 244-14A is the part about the 3 years. The planning board may require by appropriate endorsement on the plan that no building be erected upon such park or parks without its approval for a period of 3 years. When do you think the 3 years starts? When does the clock start ticking on the 3 years? Does it start the day we vote on the plan? Does it start after the appeal period? Does it start after you get a building permit? Does it start after all the houses are built?
Well, that's a great question. I don't have the case law on that, so I don't know the answer to that.
I think before the planning board makes a decision on A or B, we'd have to maybe, would make a better informed decision if we knew that the answers to that 3-year business. And then, is it your understanding that after 3 years, if the town or someone else doesn't buy it to keep it as open space, it goes back to the developer, and the developer can build a house on it?
Yes.
And then, how much open space would the subdivision have after that?
We will have the 18 or 19% of which you've agreed in these letters that 10% of it is now upland, so it meets.
No, if the planning board approves 244-14A,
Okay.
B is the 10%. So am I wrong that if after 3 years, no one buys it, the developer builds a house on it, is there 0 open space now?
No. We've complied with both of those. You may choose not to have us comply with A, but B, we've complied with. The plan has indicated a open space easement all around the site on the recording plan, the land plan, and it will be deeded that way according to this plan. So
But
B is being complied with, notwithstanding A.
even though the rule states that the planning board may require either of the following, not both.
Right. But you're gonna get B anyway. That's a gimme. That's done. It's on the plan.
So okay.
And
But if we read this letter from Open Space and listen to what was stated, that the open space being provided under 244-14B is useless and difficult to manage, should the planning board say, we don't want it?
I honestly don't know the answer to that.
And then
I
after
don't
3
know.
years, there's 0 open space.
Well, that would be your election. It's not our proposal. We're giving you that, and understanding from a long time ago that open space was gonna be an issue where we just couldn't come to any resolution on, we said, we'll give you both. If you want A, fine. But it's only for 3 years, and I don't know when that starts, so maybe it's 3, maybe it's 4, but at some point in time, A will be off the board, but B will always remain under our proposal.
Right.
Okay.
But again, if the town, we're hearing tonight that it's useless and that it's difficult to manage. So if it's decided that we don't want it,
Okay?
what happens to it? You'll just make it part of the people's backyards?
We'll do whatever your decision says to do with B,
Okay.
whatever your decision says.
Mrs. Luttrell?
I think most of it follows along with the 20 and 25-foot no-touch. There are a couple little spots of little 10-foot strips that aren't part of the requirements under the Conservation Commission. So if we get the 3-year parcel and the selectmen don't purchase it, we still have all of the Conservation Commission no-touch, which is 99% of what's there for open space now.
That's true. You do get a little more. 99, I think, is a bit high, but you do get a little bit more.
I just remember that, yeah, go ahead, Bill, go to the, I just remember that we won't, that some of these subdivisions, we wind up with nothing. under the old rules.
I empathize with you, I really do. We did come in and spend a long time talking about a big open space in the front. And every permutation of that flexible bylaw that we tried to implement, going to talk to Shop C and other people, it was impossible to get there. It really was. And I think the planner, what was her name? Jen Burney. She spent a long time on that too. We were convinced that it had to be an as-of-right subdivision. We didn't want to do that. We really didn't. The developer didn't. But we really need to have a set of guidelines that we can meet and be able to demonstrate compliance. I understand the heartfelt issues about open space, but I also don't understand how it is such a touchstone here where it's surrounded by a lot of open space, and in particular, the open space on the trustees of the reservation. That's almost all wetlands. There's channels that come down through that. So I don't understand.
Mr. Pizzoni.
Yeah, Bill Pizzoni. Don, all the subdivisions I was involved with through the last 35 years, I don't recall any lot being set aside for open space. That's number one. Number two, what value do we put on it if you're going to buy it back from the developer? Is it as a buildable lot, or is it going to be as open space? Because there's a big difference in the value of the lot. So if you're going to go back and talk to Aldo on this, I think that needs clarification.
Yeah, we haven't, we clearly moved away from that because we wound up with zero open space. All the lots wound up going back to the developer, who then built a house on the lot. And so it was, you're right, we have no, it's never happened.
Yeah, and it was probably when Brownie Schwartz was doing them that you might have held one out, but I know there were none in my 35 years here.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that.
He's saying it was back when Brownie was the town council,
Yeah.
back in the 80s. But I think the bottom line is that, and if the 3 years is, if some of those 3 years is when we still have concrete trucks and lumber trucks rolling through there every day, you know, it's not a quiet, peaceful piece of open space. So I know we're gonna go to town council and ask when he thinks this clock starts ticking, but if most of the 3 years is a time when there's big construction going on, and depending on where that lot is placed,
That is the very essence of why 81U exists. So when the trucks are rolling down the road, the kids are out in the bigger subdivisions playing on a piece of land rather than in the way of the trucks back in the 50s when the subdivisions were hundreds and hundreds of lots. It says park or playground in this. That's the statute. Whether it's 3 years from the day you start or the endorsement on the plan, it says the endorsement on the plan. I don't think it makes much difference because in the end, you can't require a developer to fund public projects as an exaction. That's Lucas versus South Carolina. Supreme Court says you can't do that. So it's going to be the value of the lot to the developer at the expiration of that time period. And I don't know if it's 3 years from the day they start or 3 years from the endorsement of the plan. I don't know the answer to that.
yes, ma'am.
So just to go back to what I had said earlier, but Donnie raised the value of if you have the lot and then after you have the lot, you have zero open space. The Open Space Preservation Commission's contends, based on historical knowledge that came evident during the deed research project, that this 10% ring around the subdivision on day one almost will be no added open space in those 10-foot strips. The buffers to the wetland where the Conservation Commission will be monitoring is another story, but as far as the rest of it, it's like at least we'd have something for 3 years. And the other concern is, again, the fact that it's in hayfields. And we know what happened to hayfields on Barn Hollow when it wasn't even their property line. It just looks like more of your land, and it's encroached upon. So it's not like what we will hear as they have lawns, manicured landscaping, which is not the intent of the open space to be an extension of your backyard. We will hear it's either going to grow up into invasive species, which isn't desirable because you're not going to hay it because it's no longer a haying field like we allowed in one subdivision. So it's going to either be invasive species, and we're going to hear, if we don't mow it, it's ticks closer to my yard. So, you know, and wildlife and coyotes and, you know, it just, when it's their private property with an easement on it for 10 feet, who's going to say don't mow that down? So we believe that on day one, if you sign this plan the way it is, all of those 10-foot strips are no open space value. So to say that at the end of the 3 years that you'll have no open space value, well, we'll say for those 3 years you did. So that was that point. We have never made such a recommendation, but again, we've had a review of every single open space lot in town, easement, and we've seen what's happened, and there's no way to monitor. It's a hardship for the property owners if it ever comes up that there's an encroachment on it down the road. So that's that point, but can I go to the other points of our letter, if you want to move on? Whichever open space it is, where it is on the plans, this was another thing that came up in the deed research project. Often the original deeds, nobody knows, and you know, the language for the open space easement gets dropped, or it never is recorded in the first place, and all of the deeds always reference the plan. So the open space requirements should be clearly visible on the plan, and we thought the first page, I'm not sure what, we came up with lotting plan was the first page, but putting it on the erosion control page, after the subdivision is built, who's going to look at that? Mass Audubon also recommended that on that page you have to list the requirements for the open space. So it has to say open space easement and then list the same requirement that's going in the deed, that's going in your decision requiring it to be in the deed, which we recommend the Northborough, we call it the Northborough Road language. It was language the planning board agreed to back when we commented on the Northborough Road subdivision. So we'd also like wherever the open space is, if you go with B, all these easements, like how much land is it on each lot? The difference between the uplands and the open space, we've seen that on other subdivisions. I know that's asking for a lot on what already seems like a busy plan, but, or have another page. I don't know if you do another page that's an open space page, or rename the, you know, erosion control page, but somehow it has to be specifically referenced in the plan that's easy to find, because sometimes it's the only reference to open space that a homeowner will see 20 years down the road. And all those items are listed in our letter.
May I respond?
George?
Land use, the lotting plan, as they refer to it, and we refer to it, shows the lots of 44,130 square feet, and it's got northeast, west, whatever. And it has a open space easement on lot 5. It has an open space easement on lot 6. That's recorded at the Registry of Deeds. The deed will mimic that. If the easement is granted to the town, it becomes by operation of law a entity. So I don't know how else to do this other than comport with registry requirements, and the plan does.
We had seen the problem where open space was listed on the plan, and then people were saying, well, what does that mean? It's my backyard, that's open space. So what's required, it was recommended by Mass Audubon that it is listed on the plan.
Mr. Morris, may I ask that you and Ms. Katrina and a member of the open space and another member of the planning board have a meeting to discuss this rather than go round and round and round at these meetings and waste time, please?
I'll ask the board to comment on that request. Mr. Jenks?
This is only a tiny piece of our going round and round on this. I don't mean on this project, on this subject of open space. There've been how many committees to address this over the years? We can try it again, but I think it comes down to, in its present state, if you meet the regulation, that's it. And the answer would be, if we don't like the regulation that allows these rings around the property, we should be working on changing the regulation.
Mr. Stein?
I have no comment.
Mrs. Luttrell?
The town just went through a multi-year project looking at all these open space easements and giving recommendations. And why would we not accept those recommendations?
Question was, developer wants a meeting set up to discuss this, for this particular project.
If I may, Mr. Stein suggested we try to meet with open space and work this out. That's the impetus of this particular meeting. We've dealt with this for over a year. We've changed it. It's twice as much open space. I don't know what to do and maintain the integrity of the lots in this particular area for the type of house and the value that it's going to be. I don't see putting open space in the middle of this site. I just don't. So I'm happy to do that one more time and see what we can do. I'm happy to do it, but I'd like to do it quickly and be ready for the next meeting.
The town planner will reach out to you regarding that, your request,
Thank you.
after tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
We're spent a lot of time on this tonight. The current approval period ends August 18th. We have, we were looking at meeting on August 14th, but I think Mr. Stein is on vacation at that time?
Correct.
So we would either meet before that or after.
I'm not available before
So we would meet after, would be like the 25th, August 25th?
I would have to get authorization for that. Are you meeting before on other matters where we could simply get that authorization? I don't know if I'm gonna get it tonight.
Well, we need to continue the hearing to a certain date.
Right.
I'm available the 24th on that Monday.
But I think the last extension was the 18th, if memory-
August 18th, yeah.
I can try and make a phone call.
Could you make a phone call, George?
You can go on to any other matters, and I'll just, you can take me when I come back.
Did you say August 25th?
No, I was adding 7 days to the approval period, not the Monday,
So it's August 21st.
21st.
So what's the date you want?
Well, we would meet on August 21st, Jesse?
I'd be available
So, the approval,
7 more days?
several more, usually the Friday of that week that we meet, so if,
So that was the 25th.
Yeah.
All right. Can I take these boards down?
yeah, okay. He's gonna make a phone call.
But that's the target.
Yep, the 21st. So, we're in suspension right now for that public hearing. You think yours is gonna be long, Bill? Rena? Brewer Estates,
Yes, we have that.
is that gonna be long?
I don't think so. It should not be.
So you actually agree with the lawyer?
Pretty close. He actually, if
He
you
had
want,
some question.
the
Did-
question was whether or not the in perpetuity language.
Hold on a second, Bill. Is it okay if we start Brewer?
Sure.
Good evening, Mr. Pizzoni. Could you get closer to the mic and tell us who you are and what you're doing,
Sure.
why you're here?
Bill Pizzoni, I'm the attorney for New England Center for Children and Diane Kim and Bear Bluff Southborough LLC, which will be the declarant for the condominium project at the 244 to 246 Boston Road. As you recall, the last meeting we were here, I was to come back to you when they were proceeding with the project and give you verbiage for the open space restriction that was going to go into the deeds and be in perpetuity on the property. Ms. Luttrell had a question relative to whether or not they could use in perpetuity, just the 30-year restriction would apply because it's private property. Aldo tended to agree with me, just wanted some extra language in it, which he asked that we add to after in perpetuity and be a covenant running with the land pursuant to MGL 124, sections 28 through 30, and then containing the change in the open space restriction.
Gotta get close to a microphone.
If I may, please have it. That language was added to the plan. It's also been added, and I'll provide these to the board, to the Massachusetts quitclaim deed, which will be going from Diane Kim to Bear Bluff Southborough LLC, which would include all the similar language. He then, in his third bullet, asked that the condominium documents reflected as well. I added a paragraph to the description of the Brewer Estates condominium and the master deed of Brewer Estates condominium. Same language as on the deed. It's also in the Exhibit A, which is the description of the property in the master deed. And I added it to the bylaws, proposed bylaws that we're going to go into with the trust and the trustees. The trust doesn't have it, but the bylaws are part of the trust document, and basically it says we'll maintain open space parcel A and open space parcel B, which are subject to a deed restriction in perpetuity and be a covenant running with the land pursuant to MGL Chapter 184, Section 26 and through 30. The only other caveat that Aldo wanted was that we noted that it was pursuant to the Southborough Planning Board's major site plan approval and special permit approval for flexible development, both dated March 26, 2012. So that's all incorporated into everything that will get recorded, and it's on the plan. And I think we comply with everything Aldo wanted.
So the action that you're requesting from the planning board is to what?
Just approve the language approve the language for the open space deed restriction for the Brewer Estates condominium project. That was a requirement in the 2 permits.
So the action of the board would be a simple motion to approve the language as
Right.
as Aldo has approved.
Yep.
For the open space parcels A and B.
Right. Oh, he made a mistake too. He had a typo or a scrivener's error. He said parcels A, B, and C, and there's no parcel C.
And actually,
Well, you gotta give us parcel C now.
There's not one in the subdivision.
Bill and I discussed this afternoon because I was looking for a parcel C on the plan, just in case it was an oversight. And if you look at the plan, there are some long finger projections along the boundaries that are part of parcel A and parcel B, like here. See these thin strips that they belong to those parcels. So we had a consensus there was no parcel C.
Right, there is no parcel C on this plan. There may have been a parcel C on, when we were doing the development of it, Don, in the back corner where the easement was being reserved for future connection for the septic down there. There was an area in the corner, a little pie-shaped piece, but that was merged with the total lot when we went forward with the condominium project.
Mr. Jenks?
What are the, looks like 3-foot strips along and don't say open space?
It is for the connection to get to the open space, for people to get to it if they want to. It's another way to get there. Also, there's a trail that is part of the state that kind of runs along that area, and I think we were going to let them utilize that to walk down that trail to get to the rest of their property.
Really? No questions.
Mr. Stein?
No questions?
Mrs. Luttrell?
I would add that, that additional language be added that the open space shall remain continuously undisturbed in its natural condition.
That's in the actual restriction.
I didn't see that in there.
It says, no building, residential dwelling, structure, parking lot, or other structure or improvement requiring construction shall be placed on the property other than unpaved footpaths and trails and improvements necessary for appropriate to assure safe passage, prevent erosion, or to protect or enhance the natural habitat.
Right. That's different than saying that it should remain continuously undisturbed in its natural.
It may not. You may have to harvest some
Right, so you can say except those things, but just to be clear that that was the intent of the use of that open space.
Sure. Give the language to Karina, and I'll make sure it gets added to all of them.
Can you just say it?
That's the Northborough Road language that we've tried to use.
That would be added to the plan.
It'll be added in the restriction and the plan and also in the deeds. I'm all set with that.
Okay.
Freddie Gillespie, Chair of the Open Space Preservation Commission. We reviewed a previous plan, but there's been some changes made, so I haven't seen them, but can I just ask, how are the open space parcels labeled on the plan?
Open space A and open space B.
And then on the page, there's a reference to what the open space means?
Yes.
Can I look?
That language is on the original plan too. We just added the language that Aldo wanted.
Thank you. This is what, This is the type of thing we were talking about for the last project, so that when you're looking at the plan, you can tell exactly where the open space is and what the requirements for it are. So, nice job, thank you.
Anybody want to make anybody want to make the motion? Mrs. Luttrell.
I move that we approve the open space deed restriction on Brewer Estates with the addition of the Northborough Road language that specifies that the open space shall remain continuously undisturbed in its natural condition.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. You were right. Didn't take that long.
It didn't take that long, and now we can let those kids move into that building. Thank you.
George, he's back.
Andrew.
Oh, he went home.
Oh, he left.
Oh, I thought you had been out there. I didn't see him.
George,
Extension?
you made a phone call?
I made a phone call. I didn't get a hold of anybody, but I discussed with the attorney for Campbell Realty regarding the timeframe to operate, and I feel no problem asking for that.
So the approval period would be extended to August 25th?
Correct.
We have a form here that you and I sign if the motion carries. Mr. Jenks, we need a motion to extend the approval period to August 25th.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we extend the approval period for, what's the name of it? Chestnut Meadow, 0 Chestnut Hill Road, to August 25th.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 4-0. So that would then allow us to continue the public hearing to what time?
August 21st? It would be 7. Because we're not having one on the 14th and we don't have any other.
7 o'clock. Okay, George? Yeah? Is that okay? Mr. Jenks?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue the public hearing on Chestnut Meadow, 0 Chestnut Hill Road, to August 21st at 7 p.m.
Second.
And that would be for the definitive subdivision
The definitive subdivision.
and the lower impact development special permit?
Yes.
So that's both public hearings, 7 o'clock on the 21st. Motion was made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 4-0. We'll see you on the 21st, George. Thank you. Yeah, you gotta,
Would you like
we
to
gotta
sign
sign this.
until
Hearing shall be, okay.
25th? I will. I can give you one now if you like.
Next item on the agenda is 4 Hidden Meadow Lane. A&R request, Rebecca Franks.
Good evening. I'm Marshall Gould, and I'm here tonight with Rebecca Franks.
You could hold on for 1 second, please?
Sure, I'm sorry, Don.
We'll ask the town planner to update the board on this discussion item.
Okay, this is for discussion item for 4 Hidden Meadow Lane. A couple months ago, the owner of the property of 4 Hidden Meadow Lane, Rebecca Franks, had submitted an A&R plan to subdivide her lot. When we received those, we researched and checked the application, and it was found that in the planning board decision that permitted the original subdivision, there was a condition that the lots cannot be further subdivided. So the applicant, Rebecca Franks, withdrew the application and asked for some information as how she could possibly proceed to move forward with her goal to subdivide the lot. Upon discussion with the board members and doing some more research, we advised her that she could do a modification to an approved definitive subdivision, requesting that that condition be changed or rescinded. The information was forwarded to town council for review as part of the A&R application to determine the standing of the planning board decision, and town council advised us that your withdrawal of the A&R was the appropriate thing to do, and also reiterated that an avenue to take would be a modification to the approved subdivision, the definitive. We also the planning department did some research to find out, based on questions from the applicant, why that condition was in there. And we found various comments related to the subdivision. And at this point, we advised the applicant to perhaps come in and discuss, so she had a forum to explain what her goals are and her approach, and why she wanted to do this in regards to what the original planning board decision had been. So that's where we are.
Thank you. Good evening, welcome.
Thank you. Now?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm Marshall Gould. I'm the attorney for Rebecca Franks and her husband, Ken Franks. They own the property that we're talking about on the plan that's behind you. It's the single large lot of over 5 acres. The other lots on this cul-de-sac are all slightly over 1 acre. This subdivision was approved. I have talked to Aldo about this. We agreed to disagree, although I don't disagree that one of the options available is a modification of a subdivision. But he said you can go in and talk to the planning board about what your thoughts are as I explain them to him. So I would just like to do that as a courtesy to the board and to Rebecca. Rebecca and Ken have lived in town since 1999. Last year, they started looking for a different home, and they wanted to stay in the town of Southborough. They have both been involved. As I've indicated, Ken is Rebecca's husband. He is a lieutenant on the fire department in town. Rebecca and he, having been here for close to 20 years, Rebecca's gotten involved also. She was on the Conservation Commission from 2011 to 2013. She was on the Town Ladder Truck Committee from 2008 to 2011. And before that, she was on the Town Kinder Group for 8 years from 01 to 08. At the time that they were looking, about a year ago, for property in Southborough, they wanted to have more land than what they currently have. Curiously, they live just south of this development on the other side of the town-owned property that's shown at the very bottom of the plan that's up there. So they saw this lot. It was available for sale. They had looked at other properties in town, but they saw this, and Rebecca, just as her background, Rebecca is a paralegal at a law firm, Cutler and Walensky, and she approached Attorney Walensky, who does real estate work, and she indicated to him that they found this lot and they were looking at it and they would like to buy it, but that what they would like to do is it's more than they wanted to spend, but that they would stretch because she was hoping it might be enough to have 2 lots. So she said to him, if I want to have 2 lots, what do I need to do? So what he did is what any real estate lawyer would do, is sees that it's an existing lot, goes and he does a title search on the property. He finds that there were restrictions that were put on, a declaration of restrictions in 1989 that by their language expired in 2009. He looked at the title and found no other restrictions. He looked at the plan, which referenced, the plan that's behind you, referenced a covenant between the owner and the Southborough Planning Board. So he looked at the covenant. The covenant did not talk anything about no lot to be further divided or subdivided. He looked at other areas of the plan that did reference open space easements, drain easements, and then he had the title searched on the property, and then came back and said, we find no restrictions that it can't be divided into 2 lots. And as a result, they moved forward. They actually then spoke to an engineering firm. They wanted to just confirm that the zoning in town was what they thought it was. They ended up putting an offer in on the home, and they ended up buying the home right around Thanksgiving of 2016. Shortly after the holidays, they met with the engineering firm again, and the engineering firm said to them, well, you do know that there's no sewer here, so you're going to have to see if it perks. So they began to do perk testing, and they put an application in to the Southborough Board of Health, and a person from the Board of Health came out while they were doing the perk testing, and they checked the box that it was not to repair a system, but that it was to put in for another building, and nobody said anything to them at the time. They did the perk, she spent the money to have the plans drawn, and then in the early spring, in April, early April, first week of April, in fact, Mike Sullivan from Cornerstone Engineering came to the town, and that's, I think, when it came to the attention of Karina, who said, let me look into it. And then I believe within a week or shortly thereafter came back and said, there might be a question. And Donnie, I understand that you were on the board back then, back in 1989. I saw the signature there. And I just want to say that this is not a case of somebody trying to say, oh, I can take advantage, I know something, but there's no notice anywhere, so I'm going to try to take advantage. These people, both Rebecca and Ken, they put a commitment on, made a financial commitment with the idea, having done their due diligence in advance, that they knew the seller did not want to let them perk and dig up their yard until they bought the property. So they took that risk, and they came in and they did everything correctly. Not only did they do all of those things, but again, the attorney that she worked for, who assisted her, said to her that there is nothing of record at the Registry of Deeds that indicates there's any restriction other than a 20-year restriction. And because they weren't looking for a 30 or 40 or 50-year restriction or anything else, they did not find it. They did not find any statement of conditions. There was nothing referenced on the plan. As Freddie talked about earlier tonight, there are things that can go on the plan that would call attention to certain things, like here, it is on the plan that there is an open space easement, that there is a drain easement. Those things do not go away. If somebody had put on the plan not to be divided, then there would have been notice, and they perhaps would not have bought this lot, and we wouldn't be in this situation here. We're not coming in with any effort. I want to make this really clear. We're not coming in to try to fight with the board. Ultimately, what they want, and to relieve them of a burden of buying a piece of land that they thought would be 2 lots, and even having a sketch of it done by the engineer before they even bought the property, they felt their only risk was whether it would perk. But he said to them, if the other lots perk, chances are pretty good you'll get another perk on this lot. And there was simply nothing of where people would check public records in the Registry of Deeds to make this known. I heard Freddie say earlier tonight, and I think her point was well taken, that people need to know when they buy property, whether it's now, or 10 years, or 20 years, or in this case, 28 years down the road, they need to know that it's going to be their property and clear title, but they need to know if there are any restrictions, that there should be a place that they routinely go to find out what these restrictions are. I was on the planning board in Northborough for 6 years. I was chairman for a period of time. I do my work predominantly has me concentrate in real estate and zoning and permitting. And I can tell you that there are ways this could be done, and it wasn't done in 1989. And for future reference, and you know, the Chestnut Hill property that we were just talking about is owned by my client, but there are ways that if you want to do open space or anything else, you can put a reference on the plan. You can put, in addition to subject to covenant between the board as recorded in the registry, you can also put subject to conditions. Zoning boards and planning boards that grant special permits or variances are allowed to routinely put on conditions, and those run in perpetuity. They don't disappear. So if you had conditions attached to an approval that were publicly recorded that people would have notice of, then in all honesty, we wouldn't be here tonight. But as a result of the lack of those and the failure of notice to Mr. and Mrs. Franks, we are in this position. So we're asking, frankly, not to establish precedent, because we think this is a very unique situation. How many times do you have a small subdivision with only one lot in the subdivision that's big enough for more than one lot? In fact, there's even the potential, if somebody wanted to be aggressive, to try to get more than one lot, but that's not what they're trying to do. As a matter of fact, the plan that they had presented, I know that you don't have it in front of you, but when they created Lot 2, they even put the back of it up against other open space. No, you don't have to. So that they don't want it further developed either. They don't want it, there's a person in the very back, and I think this board did a very wise thing by having an open space easement, because it did prevent having somebody put a road through an open space easement to attach to other land, thereby allowing another subdivision. So we are here saying that there are various possibilities. There's an A&R, there's a modification to the subdivision, there's trying to get a variance, although, you know, depending upon the way the town would go on a variance, we don't want to go for a variance because we don't feel that we want to try to make up arguments about, well, there's a hardship relating to the soil, shape, or topography of the lot. We would rather be very honest and tell the board why we are here and why Rebecca and her husband find themselves in this position. With that in mind, I believe, and I have talked with, I have talked with one of the largest title insurance companies in the country, is First American Title Insurance Company, and I spoke to their head counsel, Gene Gervitz and Sheila Hurley, and they both agreed that it is not ordinary or even extraordinary practice for somebody to automatically go and look at planning board minutes, because they can so easily attach them, the same as a zoning board or a planning board could if there is a special permit or a variance involved. So we are asking that the board consider the signing of this as an A&R. If the board says no, then there are two options available to Rebecca, and this is not for me to recommend that she be hard-nosed. I'm just advising you what I advised her, that she could either appeal the failure to sign the A&R or she could go for the modification. One way or the other, what we'd like to do is just have an open dialogue tonight about, if we were to come back on a modification of a subdivision, would you be inclined to grant it to us? We don't know what abutters are going to come in, but we do know that it's a 5-acre lot. I have been told that there was a letter from DPW back way back when, or from the DBW chair, I should say, and that he was concerned about there being a connection to other land for subdivisions. And if that's the case, then it makes sense why you would not want a further subdivision, because you wouldn't want this road extending out and going into other land. But when you have a 5-acre lot with all of this land, honestly, we just don't understand the concept of why it wouldn't be allowed, because if the developer had come in originally with those two being 2 lots instead of 1 lot, my guess is it would have been approved, because it's not creating much more traffic, certainly. Maybe, having been on the planning board, I always used to say every lot, 10 car trips a day. So it might be another 10 car trips a day, but that isn't much. The road can certainly handle it. So that's why we're here, and we're throwing this out for discussion, not trying to make an argument that anybody here was wrong.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the board. I just caution that when we have these discussions, we must remember that what we say is, I guess maybe for the moment, we haven't consulted. We do have a letter from our town council. You have council here. We don't. So we'll see to what extent the board wants to discuss this. Mr. Jenks.
Are you just addressing to what extent we want to discuss this, or are we discussing?
Whatever you want to do. Whatever we want to do.
I think it's worthy of discussion. Your council has come in with a good approach to sit down and talk about it, and not hard-nosed, this is what we're going to do. I appreciate that. This is an unusual situation. Are you saying that the declaration of restrictions is not in the title path?
It is, but it very clearly says, and I brought copies,
I have
that,
one.
that this declaration will last for 20 years,
Agreed, it does
at which
say
time
that.
it then terminates.
Okay.
So she bought it believing, and the attorney even said to her, that now you could buy it and do it. If you had done this 10 years ago, you would not have been able to until 2009.
What is the status, if you know, of Hidden Meadow Lane? Is that a town road? Is it?
It is a public way. It has been accepted. I do have the date in here, but I asked Rebecca to please check with Karina, and it got back that it was, I don't remember the date, but if you want me to take the time to go through all my records, I can tell you the exact
We're
date.
just discussing.
Exactly.
I take you on your word on that. What I find interesting is that if there is anything to be said about an A&R, it is that it doesn't demonstrate a subdivision. You can't do an A&R if there's a subdivision.
Correct.
So what you're really asking is for the board to determine that dividing this property in two would not be a subdivision, which is another consistent argument, I believe, with what you're saying is the declaration is expired anyway. It's a public road, it clearly has frontage. Now, I say clearly, I haven't seen how they want to subdivide it, but I'll take your word for it
Yes.
at this point. If you say both lots would have.
There's not even going to be a new curb cut on the street. The entrance is going to be off their existing driveway, and then they will split. And if you look at the plan right behind you,
Yeah, I have it
the
here.
very rear point of the plan, I'm assuming that north is directly up north, so the most southeasterly portion is going to be the new lot coming off of the same driveway entrance that serves the Franks property. And that would be 1.13 acres, and the Franks would keep 4 acres.
Yeah, that's the same plan I'm looking at here,
Now, they have it on there.
and I don't see on this where their house is or where their driveway is,
Do you have a number of these?
but,
We can show that to you.
sure, but assuming that
They're not
those
even close.
requirements are all met,
Right, and there's no, the thing is that we don't want to build any new road, and we don't want to build any new curb cuts. We want to keep it exactly as it looks now, just in the very back, there will be one other house. And it will be on a 1.13 acre lot, which is consistent with the size of the other lots in the subdivision.
well, I'll hear from the rest of the board on their thoughts on this, but I'll share my thoughts before we
Okay, thank you.
get through tonight.
Mr. Stein?
Has there been any contact with Li Gao and Yang Zhang on this matter? They're an abutting owner.
Are they the ones,
Yes.
you tell me, have there?
We had a brief conversation because they have approached us for a couple things. One, they wanted to know why we were digging. So we just explained that we were perking and considering, and two, because we were discussing mow lines. So we had discussed, they sort of asked, but there's a slight communication barrier that we have to, well, it's kind of a large one. There's not a lot of English being spoken, but we tried to explain what we were looking at doing, but haven't formally approached them to ask if it would bother them.
And then on the southern boundary of the proposed Lot 2, town of Southborough, what is that?
That's open space, I think.
I believe it is, do you know, Freddie?
I believe it's owned by the town, and I only know that because I lived in Hubley Lane, which is up the hill, directly looking down on this, and it's,
Excuse me, can you avoid the paper?
Oh,
on
I'm
the-
sorry. Yes,
Raising heck with their,
I apologize.
So where I'm going with this is, I think I'd be curious, it would factor into my thought process in evaluating this, if we had a butter's input, and certainly their support would help me. Where on Lot 2, are you proposing that you would actually develop Lot 2 eventually as the owner, or would you just be selling it as raw land? What are you gonna do?
we haven't officially decided. Initially, we're gonna keep it, but we've been approached by multiple people actually to purchase it, so I don't think we will develop it. I think we will probably sell it and allow someone else to develop it, which means we would be in charge of what restrictions go on that specific piece.
I mean, I'm pretty torn. I don't mean to be wishy-washy about it. I certainly understand where you're coming from. It's pretty straightforward in many ways in terms of how it could be an A&R, or actually would be an A&R if not for the declaration of the restriction on the declaration of covenants. But that does throw a little bit of a legal, logistical monkey wrench, and in the I think, you know, I as a planning board member, I have to interpret the spirit of that declaration to prevent further division, but it is worded as subdividing, so I don't know.
And the document you're referring to, you called it which document now?
What?
You said the spirit of that document and the document you're referring to?
The 20-year, the restriction on
Which was
further
a-
dividing the.
Which was a developer restriction.
Right.
That's not made by the planning board. And,
Right, but I'm sitting here looking at it now as a
Okay.
planning board member.
right, and what I'm getting at is, when you look at it, it's not uncommon that you see sometimes developers do these for 20, sometimes for 30 years. But the point is, a private restriction can't be for more than 30 years unless you go through some hoops and try to extend it, and you have to give notice to all property owners. So even if it were a 30-year, it would expire in another year and a couple of months. The point I was trying to make is what the planning board may want to consider doing in the future is recording their decision and having every plan say C decision recorded in whatever the book and page is or instrument number. When I was on the Northborough Planning Board, we faced a situation like this, so we actually did change the procedure, and now, I don't know if they still do, but I know in my second term, we recorded the decision because of the fact that even back then, restrictions were good for no longer than 30 years. Or what we would do is make it a recorded condition of approval on the plan. So you can have perpetuity restrictions if they are worded, as Mr. Pizzone said earlier and as Aldo said earlier, if the purpose is to preserve open space, and if you state all those reasons, you can have them in perpetuity. But if it just says shall not be divided, that can't be indefinite.
So, you know, and thank you very much for your comments and your feedback. We appreciate it. I would say at this point, in the absence of support from the abutters, the safe option for the planning board is to evaluate this as a modification or amendment to the original subdivision approval. I realize that that's not what you came in here to hear, but again, in the point of having a restriction is really, in my mind, is to protect the community to some extent. And in this case, the immediate abutters would be the ones that would be protected by going the route.
What if we were to continue this to your next meeting under an ANR, and either you or we come up with a form of notice that's acceptable and notify them that they should come, that there's an ANR informal hearing on this matter? Because there's a considerable expense, too, involved in filing a subdivision.
I would be, you know, we'll see what the rest of the board thinks.
Okay.
Mrs. Luttrell.
I'm torn. Administratively, if we're asked to endorse an A&R and there's frontage, I think that we have to. On the other hand, there is case law that supports that the decision of the planning board is binding. So if we endorsed an A&R, I would think that we would make the building inspector aware of our decision and town council's opinion. So I would think it would be difficult to get a building permit. So we end up back at a modification of a subdivision.
We sent this to town council. It doesn't say confidential here, so I can believe this is, at least I can read part of it, which says, accordingly, the appropriate avenue for administrative review is not an A&R plan, but a modification or amendment to the original subdivision approval, which addresses the condition of record that no lots shown in the approved subdivision will be further subdivided. So I agree. I believe that's the route to go, is the modification to an approved subdivision. We just had one recently where the modification was to change the name of the street that the planning board approved. The original plan was submitted. There was an application. There was no engineering review. It was unnecessary. It was a very minor effort to get to that point. They withdrew. It never went beyond that, but based on town council's opinion and my belief that this is a subdivision, that if you are creating this new lot, you're subdividing, and an A&R is not appropriate. So, that's my opinion at this time. What I'd like to do is follow up with town council on this, and if you want to come back at our next meeting, we'll put you on the agenda. But again, when an attorney shows up in front of the board
I completely understand.
and speaks, and we don't have our attorney,
I agree.
we respectfully ask that we be given an opportunity to have our attorney huddle with you or to be here when you're speaking.
And I respect that, and I made it very clear, I'm not coming in here trying to push or saying I'm going to run out. We did not even file the A&R today or tonight, because I don't want there to be any thought in your head that, oh, if we don't do this, he's going to rush out and appeal. That's not my style, and I told Rebecca that for me to come in. Could I ask this question of you? I guess two things. Would you authorize Aldo to talk with me outside of the next meeting so that he and I could talk about it? Because when...
I don't have that authority, only Mark Purple. We put all of our legal opinion requests in writing through the town administrator.
I understand, okay.
If he feels it's unclear or if it's frivolous, he bounces it back. If he feels that it's legitimate, and we're properly presenting the questions or the concerns, then he moves it on to town council.
I'm not sure how you would want to move forward, but instead of making Aldo come to the next meeting, Aldo and I were working together on a different matter, and I said, Aldo, you may get a request on this, and he said, oh, I already had a request, and I can tell you, I ruled against what your client wants to do. If you want to ask the town administrator if he would authorize Aldo to talk with me, it might be that in the course of an open conversation that we could maybe avoid having to come back and discuss an A&R, and maybe we might end up going his route. But I'm leaving that up to the board. But I would like to ask a second question. Did this board hear anything tonight that you think would give you reason not to vote in favor of a modification of that condition? Or is that not something you can give your opinion on now?
I believe we'd have to do a little bit of research to see what the impact of this would be on other parcels throughout the town. As recently as 2 weeks ago, the town planner and I were discussing something very similar to this in another neighborhood in town. So this isn't the first time that somebody has looked at approved subdivisions that were finalized and approved by the planning board with these reduced densities, and now, years later, people come back and want to undo that.
Okay. I just want to leave the board with this knowledge that Mr. and Mrs. Franks are not developers who moved into town, moved into this house so that they could come in and innocently say, oh, well, I live here. I didn't buy this so that I could, just develop it, and then I'm going to become a developer, build a house, sell them both, and move away. They've been in this town for, as I say, close to 20 years. They live nearby. They tried to buy a nicer house, which they did, but they did on the basis that they felt that they have an opportunity here. and they did everything that they could do. I consider myself an excellent conveyancing lawyer. That's 90% of what I do is zoning and conveyancing. And when she called me, when I say she, Rebecca, forgive me, when Rebecca Franks called me and said, we have the following situation, and she said, do you mind if I ask, if I came to you and said I'm interested in buying a piece of property, but I want to know if I can get 2 lots, what would you do? And I told her what I would do, and one of the things I never said I would do is come into town and look at minutes of a planning board meeting. I've been practicing for 40 years, and I'm one of the busiest conveyancing lawyers in Worcester. I go all over the state. I am a top-rated lawyer, AV-rated lawyer. I've never had a malpractice claim. And I represent large banks, and I represent good developers, including some in this town. And this, the board should also learn from this experience that if there's something you want to have that you don't want to expire in 20 or 30 years, you have to do something about it by putting it on a plan.
But isn't that the
making it a
point?
condition.
That's your opinion, and I believe you said that you've agreed to disagree with town council. Town
See-
council says that it runs with the land.
No, it does not. What he said.
Well, that's your opinion,
No, I
and we're
understand.
getting his opinion.
Okay, and I don't mean to discuss it here, but case law, and I'm not sure whether he referred to case law or whether Mimi researched it yourself, but I did research it before coming in here, and that's why I called First American Title Insurance Company, and I said, if a claim were to ever be made, they said, you've done everything you can do. If somebody searches the title, and they look at the plan, and they look at the deeds, and they don't see a common scheme of restrictions from the other deeds, and I checked the other deeds, there was nothing in those other than that 20-year declaration, which clearly says this expires after 20 years. There is no requirement, and I looked at the standards of practice in Massachusetts, and I looked at best practices in Massachusetts through the Real Estate Bar Association. I don't know how much, and I'm not here to offend Aldo. Aldo's a friend of mine. I mean, I respect his work greatly. But I think he's a lot better than me at being a town council. I think when it comes to title issues, I own my own title company. I probably do more title work than just about anybody in Worcester and around the state. I'm one of the biggest. So I'm saying that from a point of view of the legal notice requirements in Massachusetts, there's a standardized way. If any of you have ever bought your homes, I don't know, even being planning board members, if you were to buy in another town, whether you would go and say, well, I have to go look at the minutes of a subdivision, because nobody does it.
Respectfully, I think we've kind of covered that.
No,
Starting to
okay,
get
and I
late.
apologize
What I'd
for
like to
carrying-
do is see if the board agrees with your request
Okay.
to have the town administrator
Ask Aldo.
get permission for Aldo to speak directly with you.
Okay.
And then I think, at least from my perspective, I would either feel more comfortable with our lawyer here at the same time that you're here, or at least have him expand on his guidance to us. So is it the board's desire or okay to request the town administrator to give Aldo the green light to speak directly with Mr. Gould?
Sure.
So what we'll do is, we'll put in an email to the town administrator reflecting tonight's meeting and asking that he give Aldo permission to speak directly with you. And then if that is in the form of him calling you or you calling him, we may suggest that we let you know that through the town planner
That's fine.
as to what the answer is and how it's.
And I'm dealing with Aldo on another matter. I'll be talking to him on that anyway, so I can ask if he has heard anything.
Okay.
All right? Thank you for your time. Now,
Did you want to, there's plenty of time to put you on
The
the
agenda?
August 21st agenda.
that would be a good idea from my point of view, if we could. And we'll probably talk to an engineer about the cost of filing a modification to the subdivision. But based on what you were saying about the street, would it be the type of thing that you would waive the need for traffic studies and the need for some of the things that would typically go with the subdivision, do you think?
Probably,
Like, if we were to request waivers?
probably.
I don't want to insult the board by asking. for
Certainly
waivers.
far less than a brand-new subdivision.
Okay.
And I know the board has, we've had some modifications over the years, and they've usually been kept pretty simple so that it's not a big burden unnecessarily.
Right.
But we do have a responsibility to the neighbors and the neighborhood to make sure that all the bases are covered. So we'll see where that takes us.
Okay. All right, thank you for your time.
Anything else?
Is that plan you handed out the same as the A&R that was submitted?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I have
Yes, so
that.
you have it on file.
All right, thanks.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next item on the agenda is other business properly before the board, the planner's report. Just take us through that.
Yes. Coming up. Just close this up. Okay. 7 quick items for tonight. Just an update on Ken's Food. The appeal period for the major site plan approval and special permit for lid ended on July 11th. They submitted a construction schedule and are currently in construction. And I have a copy of that construction schedule. If anybody would like it, I can email it to you. Killen Farm Open Space with Giblin Properties. We received a draft deed and showing the property into a preservation trust. And we're in the process of preparing a legal opinion request to town council to review the information that was requested at the discussion at a previous planning board meeting.
Did a copy of that go to the Open Space Preservation Commission for their comment?
Elizabeth, do you know if we forwarded that? We haven't forwarded to Aldo yet either, so we'll do that at the same time. We'll send copy to Open Space. Thanks for reminding me. Okay. Just want to update you. We did execute a contract with Mass Autobahn for open space inspections. Oh, I'm sorry. 74 to 76 Marlborough Road.
I have to recuse myself from that.
Okay.
Are you more than a few words to get out the door, or?
Can I go ahead? I just wanted to ask Jesse if you could follow up with me on if you wanted me to proceed to speak to the attorney at the time to find out about the language for 76 Marlborough Road. Just wanted some guidance.
Sure.
Okay, so move forward with asking.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it for 74.
Coming back, Phil? We're all done with 74, 76. Next item is Mass Autobahn contract.
Okay, so again, the planning department, with the help of the planning board, executed a contract with Mass Autobahn for open space inspection contract. The contract is for $8,950. I had made a budget calculation error. Anyway, we're well into working on a template to come up with a standard form for doing those inspections. And once we have that template, then we'll pilot test it on some open space parcels. And then I'll follow up with on what the template looks like at one of the next planning board meetings. Number 5, just to clarify for subsidized housing inventory, because this question had come up previously. Jesse Stein had asked about clarifying what happens after August 24th, when building permits are not yet obtained by Park Central. I spoke with the DHCD contact, and she indicated that when appeals are pending, the one-year deadline for building permits still holds. If new applications are submitted for comprehensive permits, that we hear them at the planning board, and it doesn't, and if you approve them and it puts you over the threshold for safe harbor of 10%, it doesn't rescind the Park Central because they technically have their comprehensive permit. It's just that they're in pending appeals. Right? The Economic Development Committee, EDC, they had a meeting last Friday, and they are in the process of sending out a survey for the downtown business village district to find out what kind of changes that district is wants. And they're doing this, I believe, part of the Main Street project in general, stirring things up and, you know, getting people active in what's going on. But there is an ULI, which is the Urban Land Institute, has a program where they grant studies to do these typical kinds of things for downtown areas or towns. So the EDC is going to be submitting an application, and in preparation for this application to come up with this study of what the downtown district wants to do, the business village district, they've created this survey, and then they'll be applying for the grant, and it's probably looking good that they might get that. So that's up and coming. The last question I have, and I just wanted some guidance, I was approached by an attorney about 5 Park Street, which is currently Ted's of Fayetteville, an auto repair service. And the attorney was working on a P&S for a new owner who wants to move into that building and do the same type of service and use, just using, just on high-end like Land Rovers and things like that, cars like that, same type of business. And he was asking if they needed a new special permit, because in the district that they're in, Business Village, I think that is. I'll have to check my notes. Anyway, you need a special permit from the planning board for auto repair services. So I wasn't sure if, and I also posed the question to the building inspector, and I'm waiting for feedback from him as well as what he thought. My guess is, my opinion would be that they would need a special permit because you don't know what they're changing, or, you know, and the prior special permit, if there was one, pertain to that particular owner and condition that owner for that particular business. So I was hoping maybe I could get some guidance on that, what to respond to him. Doesn't have to be now, but if you want to answer me, you know, during the week, or follow up with me what your thoughts are.
I don't think we're familiar with the special permit. So it would seem to me that would be a question for the town council.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if special permits run with the land. I know variances do, so that is for me, it would be a town council question.
Okay. And that's what I had for tonight.
We have minutes. June 19th. That's the one that Mr. Stein missed.
approve these together or one at a time?
Let's do the June 19th one, Phil. Mr. Jenks.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from June 19th, 2017.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 3-0. June 26th.
One second. I recused myself from one of the things there, so I can't.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the planning board approve the meeting minutes of June 26th, 2017.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? 3-0. Very good. So our next meeting is going to be August 21st. Think we're going to have all 5? Mr. Stein.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? 4-0. We are adjourned. Thank you.